Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting for Monday, December 4th, 2023. I'd first await a motion to leave the non-public and to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And Kelly, when you are ready, can you please take the roll?
Mayor McEachran,
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Tabor,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Moreau,
Here.
Councilor Bagley,
Here.
Councilor Lombardi,
Here.
Councilor Blaylock is absent, and Councilor Cook.
Here.
And as we head into December and we have a fantastic presentation to look forward to on housing, let us remember those folks that do not have housing and to remind anyone that if you are in need of a shelter, a warming shelter is provided at Operation Blessing when the temperature drops below 32 degrees. Please always reach out to the City of Portsmouth for assistance there. Join me in the national anthem, or the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Start tuning our voices. We have to sing.
Before we get started, I know there's somebody out there with a bedtime, and so I'd wait a motion to suspend the rules to bring up Section 13, Portion B.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This is under presentations and written communications. It is a letter from Cody Burrow requesting the city alternate every other year between white and colored lights on the Christmas tree in Market Square. Now, if we were just receiving this letter today, it would be too late, but we didn't. We received this letter quite a few weeks ago, and this, I believe, is to accept the donation on behalf of Mr. Young, Cody. I would invite Cody and his parents to come up and present to the City Council.
Is it okay if we read the letter?
Absolutely.
We practiced earlier, I promise. You don't want to? You want me to read it? All right. This will work then, I think. Dear Mayor and City Council, this is Cody. He's 7 years old. He's writing on behalf of the residents of Portsmouth that would love to see colored lights in the Christmas tree in Market Square. My family, this is in his voice, moved to Portsmouth a couple of years ago. I love walking and scooting downtown year-round, but I really love it during the holidays. The only problem is that the Christmas tree in Market Square always has white lights on it. My dad really likes white lights, but my mom and I love colored lights because they're more fun. I think it would be fair if we alternated colored and white lights every 400 years. Or every other year. I've started a petition and a fundraiser for the cause. We've received nearly 700 signatures over the course of only 6 weeks. We've also raised over $2,000 to pay for the lights, while also supporting two great charities that are close to our hearts, I Got Bridged and Smile Train. Please accept the donation to the City of Portsmouth in the amount of about $1,100 to cover the cost of the colored lights. The remaining money we have raised will be split between our two charities. And that said, we'd like to keep our fundraising going through the end of the year and would appreciate anything the town's willing to do to help raise additional funds. Thank you for your consideration and happy holidays. Sincerely, Cody. And we've left some cards with QR codes over on the table over there in case anybody wants to grab one on the way out.
Thank you very much. And Cody, we have something for you. On behalf of the City Council, we have a Mayor's Award presented to Cody Borough. This award is presented in recognition of Cody's efforts to illuminate the city's holiday tree with multicolored lights. His dedication to this cause and to the fundraising that also enriched IGOP Bridge and Smile Train demonstrate that a 7-year-old with a vision can make a positive difference in our city. Cody is a shining example of what we mean when we say our community works best when we work together. So, Cody, I'm going to come down and give you this, and thank you for a job well done. And me and my daughter, I'm going to say daughter, as my 3-year-old doesn't have a say or doesn't express it yet. Big fan of the colored lights. The wife wants the white back, but I figure that's like a lot of families. So, Cody, I'm going to come give you this. Oh, sure. Oh, do we have to, yeah, I guess we got to take the money. Do I give this to Kelly? Who gets the check?
City manager.
City manager gets it? All right.
Give it to the city manager.
Next up, we have recognitions and volunteer committee reports. First is the presentation of the Blue Ribbon Committee on Historical Archive. Tom Watson, can you, oh, there you are. I'd wait a motion to continue the, well, I guess we'll wait till the presentation.
You want to read the minutes?
Yeah, well, I was ready to do the, motion, but I guess we'll hear the presentation first.
Well, I'd say that Cody's a tough act to follow.
It is. That's
I hope
Hi, Cody.
I hope you'll bear with me. So it is my distinct pleasure to be here tonight on behalf of the Blue Ribbon Task Force to study the feasibility of a private-public historic archive. Most of the committee is here tonight, and we also have representatives from each of the non-city organizations that were represented on the council, on the committee, and after my comments, each of them would like no more than a minute to just reinforce the decision-making that went into this committee and the report. Just for the record, I should say Tom Watson, 200 Newcastle Avenue. So in your materials, you saw our final report and recommendations. What I'd like to ask you tonight is to support the work of the committee by first formally accepting the report, and second, to adopt the recommendations that are set forth on page 32 of the report. The thrust of that of the report is that sort of the preview of coming attractions. Yes, it is a feasible. In fact, it's a desirable outcome to approach an historic archive to a joint effort of both private and public parties. So to briefly take you back, in September of last year, this council appointed the task force, and it was given a very singular mission or singular goal, and that is to explore the feasibility of a private-public partnership to create and operate a proper archival facility to preserve records and materials related to the city's past, present, and future. Represented on that committee, on the task force, are the institutions of the Strawberry Bank Museum, the Portsmouth Athenaeum, and the Portsmouth Historical Society, as well as the Public Library. Each of these organizations has, as part of its core mission, the collection and preservation of materials related to Portsmouth history and culture. And then each of these organizations are now faced with the challenges of finding adequate space and adequate financial resources in order to achieve that core mission. And the outcome of this report, as I said, is that a jointly organized, operated facility is the preferred way of going. So To briefly tell you what the task force did, I could say that we all got in a room and spent 2 or 3 hours and realized that, yes, it is feasible to do, and come back and told you that in October of last year. But in fact, the task force has spent a considerable amount of time doing a deep dive into the various obstacles and factors, as well as benefits of approaching a historic archive in this fashion. And so, just to give you an idea, we met, starting in January, we met twice monthly and had over 20 meetings. In addition, we had 2 public hearings, one in June in which it was a general one, it was open to the public with a simple request to ask people to tell us what they thought about the concept of a public archive. That meeting was very well attended, particularly with members of the constituent organizations. And then secondly, in the middle of November, we came back, we presented the public with the conclusions and the recommendations that you see in the report before you, and requested feedback. And again, the meeting was well attended and the feedback was all positive. In fact, many of the speakers offered comments on better ways of operating the facility. It was almost an assumption that this is the way we ought to go. Let me share some experience on how to make it work better. So consistently, we have heard positive feedback. So in addition to those meetings and during the non-public sessions, we heard from each organization. We learned about its collections, its policies, its space, current space allocated to preserving these, as well as potential future needs. We examined the collection and preservation policies of each of the organizations, the written ones. We toured the facility, so we actually got to see where records, where other materials were being stored, under what conditions. We witnessed the crunch in space, if you will, that each of these organizations faces trying to achieve its mission. We also learned of the efforts of other groups and other communities. We personally met with, or he was kind enough to join us, a retired archivist from the state of New Hampshire who shared the experiences of the state and its building its archival facility. We learned of the current standards of historic preservation. And I will say that this was a great learning experience for someone like me who is not in the business, but it's a sophisticated approach. We can't just put materials in a room and turn the air conditioner on and assume that they'll be okay. In fact, every single type of material has a different requirement in terms of temperature and other factors. So we did learn what the current standards of this type of facility are. We spent some time learning of the funding opportunities that are out there, primarily from federal and private foundations. We learned that among the factors that are considered are whether the person or the organization that was requesting funding was acting on its own or acting in concert with other organizations. And the latter is generally more favorably received. We also learned of past efforts in Portsmouth of the same group of organizations to look at the opportunities, and we tried to learn why those were unsuccessful and why it might make a difference now. So, and finally, we also tried to get a grasp on what the projections for growth of these collections are. I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that the city in particular has requirements of maintaining documents required by state law, and those documents grow every single day. And so that was sort of how we approached the question of the feasibility. And let me just digress for a minute to say that I think each of the members of the committee was very pleased with the cooperation and assistance that we received from both the individuals in the various organizations and from various representatives of the city. I think in particular of Katie in the public library, Katie Tchaikovsky, and of Abby Mills in the finance department. Again, it was a mission that was well received by the people from whom we asked information. So we also learned of what the consequences are of not tackling this issue more sooner than later. So we learned, for instance, that the lack of adequate climatized archival storage leads to deterioration of objects, leads to destruction in some case. We heard various stories of how different donors of archival material had to be turned away because one of our organizations doesn't have the space for it, or we might have one example of some form of material, and because there's not adequate space to store another one, we've had to turn that away, and that object leaves the city of Portsmouth, leaves our community. We also learned that there are individuals who have fairly significant collections of Portsmouth-related material, and those individuals now look to what type of efforts are made by the potential donor or donee organizations to take care of those materials after the donation is made. And if there is not an adequate facility, that those donations will go somewhere else. And more often than not, that means they will leave the community. So at the end of the process, we came to the conclusion that there are, in fact, significant benefits to approaching the archiving of historic-related materials, and those benefits are greatest when it's done in a joint effort because they offer certain benefits that are not available to individual organizations that try to do their share on their own. So, for instance, we learned that there are cost-saving benefits, both in the acquisition and development of real estate, staffing of a facility after it's been constructed, security, climate control, almost anything you can think of would be less expensive if it was done as a group than if each individual organization had to do it on its own. We learned that, as I mentioned earlier, there are federal and private foundational financing available. Some of that financing would be available to private organizations, but not governmental units. Others might be more available to governmental units. And so, in most cases, it's more available, or the request is more well received if it is through a group effort than a standalone effort. We determined that, in fact, there'd be greater access to archival material if there was a single facility. Not only would it be sort of a one-stop shopping for researchers or the public, but it would avoid the problem that now exists of having to find different hours of operation of different organizations, et cetera. So there would be greater public access. There would be more educational opportunities for students in the school system if there was a facility in which that could be incorporated into their curricular. We were of the opinion that there would likely be an increase in scholarly research if there was a single facility. In other words, more would be written about and deeper dives would be done into the history of Portsmouth if there was a single facility. We also came to the conclusion that there would be a greater opportunity for cultural historical tourism than currently exists under the separate institutional approach. So the last sort of question we had before coming to our recommendations was, well, why hadn't this worked before? It's the same group of organizations, and our best conclusion was that the past efforts failed because the individual institutions were hesitant to let go of their collections and to collaborate, and probably of greater consequence, there was just no certainty of financing. And so we ultimately, the same institutions that are here today, and you'll hear from each of them, came to the conclusion that they can better now see the benefits that are available, and they can see that the joint approach is, the collaborative approach, if you will, is a much more successful model for solving the problems that each of these organizations has, the same problems that the others have. So with that conclusion, on page 32, if you've had an opportunity to review the report, you can see we made 7 recommendations. The first of those is to continue the task force. I recognize that by nature of being a Blue Ribbon Task Force, on December 31st, it turns into a pumpkin and disappears. So we're asking that come early January that the mayor and with your support will reconstitute the task force to move forward and to address the remaining items that are in that list of recommendations. Each of those items is a pathway to accomplishing this in what is going to be a fairly long and a complicated effort, but a workable one. And the next steps that the task force can pursue are really refining the funding model, to have an assessment done of each of the collections, including the city's collections. That's sort of a mandatory step before you can talk to any organizations for funding, before you can try to figure out how big a facility you need, et cetera. So we're not asking that we go out and put up a building next year. You might have some other buildings that require more attention, but we are asking you to continue this effort and through the form of the continuation of the task force. And if in accepting this report, we ask that you adopt those recommendations and let the task force move forward next year. Questions?
Councilor Moreau. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much for going into all that detail. I just have a couple of questions. One is related to your recommendations. Number 2 specifically, you put in estimated costs. I'm just curious if the estimated cost relates to the actual assessment, or does it relate to something else? It was a little confusing as to what it was actually estimating.
Okay. So that's the estimated cost of doing an assessment of all the organizations, all 4 organizations. And so, and Tom Hardiman, who you hear from, is sort of our expert on assessments and the costs, and he can explain it further. But that wouldn't necessarily be an expenditure that the city would write a check out tomorrow, but it would be an expectant cost of getting that assessment of everything done.
Okay. And if I can just have a follow-up question. I guess, and you even brought out and talked about that there's funding sources for private nonprofits and there's funding sources for governmental agencies or municipalities as it is. Were you able to, because I know there's a lot of sort of specific laws around what the city has to do and their archival and, you know, its availability, its security, the whole 9 yards. And I'm sure that those might be a little bit different. Did you talk about and find ways where that could be melded together, or was there no possibility of that?
No, in fact, I think our recommendations envision that there will be a organization, a separate legal entity established that would include the city and the other organizations, and that would be making the request and operating, if you will, the facility. We'd have to define, one of the recommendations is that the task force work on establishing the model of that entity. Couldn't tell you what that's going to look like today until you get further detail on the funding. So all these are a little bit tied into each other or codependent. But the answer is we believe that you'll be able to get access to both sources.
Great, thank you.
Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you so much for all of you being here in that presentation. Number, I believe, 4 in your recommendation is the task group review and recommend which organizations will make up the consortium and how they'll be represented in the operations of the archive. Obviously, there's the 4 major represented here, but my question would be, has the Blue Ribbon Committee reached out to other organizations? I think of obviously the Black Heritage Trail, the Seacoast African American Cultural Center. I know that they have, their own storage unit and thousands of archives, but also things like Fosse and the Temple and some other organizations. So I know it's written here as a recommendation, but I guess I'm looking for a little insight of what has been done and how we look to include the smaller organizations.
Sure. Actually, early on in the process, we discussed whether it was an appropriate time to go out and find every organization in the city that might have some historic material worth preserving. And the task force came to the conclusion that it was more appropriate to focus with, I don't want to say the big players, but the major the organizations with major collections, and try to devise a system that worked with that group. Two things that came out during the process. One was that there are a lot of organizations in Portsmouth who have already lent or donated their archival records to the Portsmouth Athenaeum. So the Athenaeum is already like an archive facility for many local churches, other groups, and that type of thing. There are organizations, as you point out, the African American, Seacoast African American Society and the Trail that we expect would be invited to be part of the process once we get down to the details. But when we discussed whether to expand it back in February and March, the concern was that we wouldn't be able to keep this as streamlined and move forward.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually have a question for legal counsel. I recently joined the Portsmouth Athenaeum as a proprietor. I just want to double check that I don't have a conflict of interest, noting that in voting on anything here, because we're not actually distributing funds or anything to benefit organizations yet at this point. Is that accurate?
Yes, if you're not going to benefit financially, then you do not have a conflict of
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. It was
With
great.
that, I'd like to invite Tom Hardiman, the keeper and executive director of the Athenaeum, to just add less than a minute of comment.
Thank you. I promise to be very quick. My name is Tom Hardiman. I'm the executive director of the Portsmouth Athenaeum. I've been with the Athenaeum for 23 years now, and I think I've been involved in discussions on a project like this for those entire 23 years. And so I would like to thank Councilor Lombardi for actually picking up the ball and running with it and getting a work product finished. I would also say that as part of the discussions of this, the Athenaeum is not looking for a taxpayer handout. We're expecting that this is going to be an actual public-private partnership. We would have skin in the game. We want the city to be able to do what the city does best. We want to be able to do what we do best and work together, and we would enhance each other's efforts. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Hardiman. Any other comments?
Thank you, Your Honor. I was just going to make a comment for Mr. Hardiman. I'm also a proprietor at the Athenaeum, and I'm sure all the other organizations do this as well. But could you just briefly, for those that don't know, explain the research library, how it's open to everyone at the Athenaeum to come in and do research on the Piscataqua region, and about how much the Athenaeum provides in kind of donation to the community for
Yes,
this research per year?
Gladly. In 1985, the Athenaeum opened its public research library, which is open free to anybody who walks in 5 days a week. and we provide access to all of our historical materials. We provide research help. We provide internet access or internet research help to people from all over the world, more than 2,000 just last year. And the Athenaeum spends about 65% of its budget. This current year, we are spending $265,000 to run a free public research library.
Thank you.
Councilor Bagley? Again, Councilor Tabor?
Yes.
Is a question, Mr. Hardeman?
Well,
Or-
just a comment. You know, those who don't read history are doomed to repeat the failures of the past. I think that's something like that. We learned when we did Art Speak that creating a joint organization as a clearinghouse for all the others, which was set up as its own financial entity with profit and loss, began to compete for funding with its patrons. And I think that was, that led to that all being unwound. And it seems to me it'd be smarter to have each of the organizations like yours have an archive fund, and it should be part of your fundraising because you have a direct interest in seeing the archive carefully maintained, and then you wouldn't have another entity you've created competing for your donors.
That is an excellent point, and that has been discussed. Tom Watson's been a big advocate for that in saying that whatever is created has to be carefully crafted so that it is not competing with the sort of individual branding of the different organizations. So if we have things that belong to the City of Portsmouth or the Portsmouth Public Library, we don't want that identity to drift away as part of this city archive. The same with Athenaeum collections, and we, as Tom said, administer the collections of 40 different 501c3s, and they currently have their own identity within our collection. So I think we have to craft it so that each of the players still maintains an identity.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
There is. Councilor Cook?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. And this might not be a question for you, but for someone else.
Okay.
Currently, that $150,000 estimated cost is not in our current budget. Would we anticipate placing an item in the CIP budget for July start? And does that timing work?
That's where it is.
Okay.
Yes.
I answered that. I said that is where it is in the CIP.
And it was anticipated that we would apply for a joint grant to get the assessment. And the logic behind that is because if you're applying for a major grant, you can't apply for an operating grant until you have an assessment in place. So that's why that's step number one.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Linnea Grimm. I am the president and CEO at the Strawberry Bank Museum. And unlike Tom, I have been here just since March. So the Blue Ribbon Committee actually has been in existence here in Portsmouth longer than I have been, but I have been really excited to hear about the work and get informed about the work since arriving here. Strawberry Bank Museum supports the recommendation of continuing the Blue Ribbon Committee. We have over 1.1 million archaeological artifacts that this particular archive would help us share with the public. Right now we have an amazing archaeologist. She digs them out of the ground, analyzes them, and then puts them in our basements. So they're kind of going back to where they had originally come from. We would much rather be able to share that with the public in terms of promoting education We also have a number of archival papers that if somebody knows about them, we are happy to share them, but it is not the easiest thing to find. And so again, being able to share, collaborate with these other organizations and allow researchers to have access to those papers are very important to us. And we're really excited to look at the next steps. We know not everything is ironed out at this point, but we think that's what the continued work of the committee will be able to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Linnea. You escaped with no questions.
I think there are two more of us left, so I'll try to make this brief as well. I'm Emma Stratton. I'm the Executive Director of Portsmouth Historical Society. I want to echo what both Tom and Linnea have said in just lending our support to this project and pursuing further action on this front. We welcome 34,000 visitors through our door every year, and we have 3,000 objects in our collection spread between the old Public Library building at 10 Middle Street and our historic John Paul Jones House. Unlike Linnea, who has collections in their basement, we have ours in the attic. So most of our 3,000 objects that are not on view are stored in the attic of the John Paul Jones House, which is not accessible, not climate control. And as we've talked about, we really want to encourage the public to engage with these objects, to be able to learn about them and learn from our history. And we just don't have a facility that makes that feasible. So we are really excited by this possibility to come together and work towards shared goals of increasing accessibility to all of our collections and better preserving these objects for future generations. So thank you for considering this, and I will turn it over to Christine at the library.
Thank you, Ellen.
Christine's good. Oh, she's coming up.
Good evening. It's been a pleasure working with this group, and I want to say an extra thank you, as Tom mentioned, to the work that was done by a lot of city employees to help us suss out some of the information that we've looked at over the course of the year. I think it's pretty obvious to those of us on staff the amount of work that it takes to take care of what the city owns. Many of those things required of us to conserve legally. Many of them donated, many of them beautiful, many of them in this room, actually. And it would befit all of us to work together as we step forward into these next recommendations as they've been laid out. So I would also encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And if that's it for speakers, are there any other questions from the council? Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Honor. And I just want to add, I think we should reappoint the committee, and I greatly support what we're doing. I understand Councilor Tabor's concerns, but I would point out the Athenaeum is kind of like the storage of last resort for when people have large family collections of photographs, when they have diaries from their great-great-grandfather who was a ship captain. And we're reaching the point there where we're going to start having to say no. And I think other communities or other nonprofits are also reaching that point where they're going to have to say no. So if we want to continue to be preserving the history of Portsmouth, I think we have to do something. And this, to me, seems like the best path forward. I recently found out, and I may get this wrong, and Tom can correct me if I do, but I think the last 3 or 4 directors of the Metropolitan Museum of Art have donated their art history collections to the Portsmouth Athenaeum. So we're becoming not just a regional, but kind of a nationwide known place that if you want history in America, Portsmouth is the go-to place. And if we had a centralized location where all these archives could be reached, not all of them, but most of them, and then you could go out to Strawberry Bank, or you could go out to the Historical Society or to the Athenaeum or to City Hall to get the stuff on the index. I think we're going to see kind of a rising tide lifts all boats situation. So I don't know that it's the same as what happened with the Art Speak. I think it has a chance to be very successful.
Councilor Bagley? Well, we will find that out. Councilor Lombardi.
Well, I want to make a motion.
Here we go.
Okay, I'd like to move to accept the report of the Blue Ribbon Task Force on Historical Archives on November 20th, 2023, and to continue the task force in 2024 to pursue the recommendations outlined on page 32 of this report.
Second.
Just to speak to that a little bit, first of all, I want to recognize the committee. They're all here except for one, and if you would just stand, and I just want to... This report was written by these people. We tried to find an example of what we are trying to do in a public-private collaboration. We couldn't find one. So we couldn't find an expert to write the report. So we did it. And what we found is that other communities came to our meetings wanting to know how we're doing it, because it is a larger problem than just us. So we are looking at a leadership role in trying to accomplish this task, and I look forward to continuing doing that. There are parts of the report that express what some people might consider criticisms of the facilities now, but I disagree with that. I think that these organizations and the city, and especially Abbey Mills of the city, have done an amazing job and have led the way to help us create this report and move on with this project. With that, I'll ask the mayor to call for a vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you so
it.
much.
Next up, public comment. I'll give it a second. If folks aren't staying for the whole meeting, you guys are more than welcome to. And first up is Kevin LaFond. Are you speaking on the archive? Yeah.
I am. It's rather anticlimactic.
It is.
Kevin LaFond, 100 Crescent Way in Portsmouth. And basically, I wanted to get up and recommend that you support the recommendations from the committee. I think that this was long overdue. I've been and still a member of a lot of the historical associations in the city of Portsmouth. But anyways, I want to thank you for your vote, and that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Glad you agreed with us on that. The next up, Tom Farini, on the topic of housing.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Assistant Mayor, City Manager, City Attorney, City Clerk, and councilors. I congratulate you all on your recent election, those of you that are elected. And in today's time, when we try to find consensus in a community to do something, we're challenged sometimes. And so I was really gratified and grateful to see that in this election, whether or not someone was elected or was unable to get elected, it was virtually unanimous that we need to build workforce housing. And I'm happy, as both the chairman of the Portsmouth Housing Authority and a resident at 69 Taft Road, Portsmouth, to say, gee, we'd really like to do that pretty soon. And I should also say that people who ran for office and weren't elected, or if you are elected, when that many people in the community agree on something, if you think of today's politics, that's pretty rare. So I see it as a real good opportunity for us to branch out as a group and try to get some workforce housing built. We've already done a successful project here in Portsmouth, and we'd love to do it again, and we'd love to work with the city in any way the city deems appropriate. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for all of your efforts previously to the city as mayor and continued efforts as chair of the Portsmouth Housing Authority. We are in your debt. Anybody on Zoom?
No.
Going on to public hearings and vote on ordinances and/or resolutions. First reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 4, Commissions and Authorities, Public Art Review Committee. I'd wait a motion to pass first reading and hold a public hearing and second reading at the December 18th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a requested change that came from the Public Art Review Committee to add a city councilor as a liaison in a non-voting capacity. And then there are just a few language cleanups, capitalization errors in the original ordinance.
And Councilor Moreau didn't catch those the first time. I'm surprised. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, we have the public hearing, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 3, Section 1.304, Recreation Board membership. I'd wait a motion to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the December 18th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have a presentation under that?
It's my understanding
It's from Kate.
came from governance.
Councilor Cook, anything you'd like to say to this?
Yes, Your Honor. The Governance Committee reviewed these changes to the ordinance and any other questions the council had at its meeting this morning, and moved it back to the council. And our recommendation is to pass it as written.
All right. Any council questions before we open the public hearing? Seeing none at this moment, I will open the public hearing on this ordinance changing for the Rec Board membership. Seeing no one rise, I will close the public hearing. Any additional council questions? I will ask for a vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Given that we have a couple coming up, and this seemed to be somewhat innocuous, Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to move to suspend the rules and schedule third and final reading of this ordinance tonight.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
So we'll have a motion
Now we need the motion, third,
to pass.
I'd wait a motion to pass third and final reading of yeah.
Yep.
This
So
mo-
moved.
This movie.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next up, public hearing, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 9, Section 1.901, municipal officials disclosures. I'd wait a motion to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the December 18th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this?
I don't think so. Let me go back to it.
Public hearing?
We do it, and we don't have a presentation on this one? Okay, so I will, any further questions? No questions? We'll open the public hearing. This on the municipal officials disclosure. Seeing no one rise in person or on Zoom, I will close the public hearing. Any additional council questions or deliberations? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I had a question on this. For some reason, my understanding was that this segment had a requirement of reporting financial disclosure of the records online, that this one did, but the elections did not. Is that an inaccurate recollection of what our discussion was at the last council meeting?
We voted it down, didn't we?
I thought it was for the other one.
For the other one,
Yeah.
I don't recall the conversation in regards to the website for this provision.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember it ever being part of it.
It was. It was.
No, that was just we just had the conversation on the,
On the election disclosure. Yeah. Okay. I won't challenge this. It was here at one point. So I won't challenge that because I want it to move forward.
If it was, I don't know what happened to it.
All right, any other conversation on this? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Is there a motion to suspend the rules and we got there's like the holiday thing at the.
Motion to suspend the rules and bring forward third and final reading.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to, wait a motion to pass third and final reading?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Now, this is the one where I have to look at a note from Kelly on. So this is public hearing, second reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 9, Conflict of Interest, Mandatory Financial Disclosures, Section 1.902, Election Candidate Financial Disclosures. And so we would need a motion, to amend Article 9, Section 1.902, published in the City Council packet to reflect the changes in the attached document that were approved on November 13th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
And maybe as per discussion, City Attorney Morel, would you walk us through this for the public's understanding of what needs to happen in order to have the discussion reflected in second reading before public hearing?
Sure. Thank you. So apologies, there was mix up here in terms of what was put in the packet. It does not reflect your votes from the prior city council meeting in which you made certain changes to what's reflected in this version of the ordinance. So the changes that were passed that are not in this document in the packet, amended paragraph B to state that the report of expenditures shall specify the cumulative total and need not be itemized, and shall be required only if the candidates or political action committee's expenditures since the last municipal election equal or exceed a cumulative total of $100. So that is the change for paragraph B. And paragraph C essentially changed the amount. Initially, it was recommended to go to $100 or more, and then it was recommended to be nothing, and then it went to $50. So the paragraph now reads, the report of monetary contributions to the candidate or political action committee shall identify each contribution of $50 or more, and the candidate will disclose the number of donations under $50 and the total sum thereof since the last municipal election by name, address, amount, and date of contributions. And then there's an last sentence that is in red here is also changed from the cross out of $100 back to $50. All such contributions in excess of $50 shall be reported whether the contribution is made in money, materials, or services. Contributions from sources unknown to the candidate shall be reported as such. So those are the changes that were made at the last city council meeting.
Okay, and we need to pass this amendment before the
Public hearing.
public hearing. Counselor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I believe there's one additional change, and it is in the handout that was passed around where under section F.I., the council struck and shall be published on the city website.
Yeah, that's in the amended version.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep, these were not, okay.
All right,
Yep.
this one has it struck here, right?
Any further discussion before making that, or taking this vote to amend to have the correct second? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, with that, we will open up public hearing. Anybody would like to speak on this ordinance change, please rise.
Good evening, Tom Neese, Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I apologize, I was trying to follow the changes by the amendments, so if my comments are a little off base because of the changes, that's why I may not have followed them all. Generally, I'm in favor of these ordinance changes for the election. I think they do improve the election reporting requirements and they make them a little more clear. I do, if I understand correctly, and I may not, I do think that the publication of the total contributions and expenses should be listed on the city webpage, and I think that's still part of the ordinance. That's that paragraph C at the end. I do think that's important. However, at least in the version distributed in the city package, it says that all of the information will be published, including addresses. I suggest that addresses not be published if we are going to publish the names of people on the webpage. If you look at federal campaign contribution databases that are online, they don't even publish the addresses of people. They publish a name and usually a location like Portsmouth, New Hampshire or something like that. I don't think we should be publishing people's addresses if that's going to be put on there. One of the things I would point out is that for the last two city council elections, last city elections, not just council elections, I've reviewed the financial statements filed the week before the election as required by the existing ordinance. And I'd like to point out that the adherence to those requirements was always incomplete in both elections. The election 2 years ago, I don't think hardly anybody reported their expenditures, even though that was required by the ordinance. And this year, this election, there were several candidates that did not file a report a week before the election, even though they were supposed to, whether they're including a negative report according to the information sent out by the city clerk. We all saw Keno signs all over the city. Somebody obviously paid for those, but there was no filing by any political action committee before the election. I don't know if they were filed after the election. I guess the reason I'm pointing it out is that if you're going to have an election ordinance, somebody has to be assigned the responsibility for following up and making sure that it's complied with. And, you know, I don't think it's adequate to just say, well, that's up to the voters. Because the election's over with by the time you find out that someone did or did not file a report. This is one of the reasons why I think the information should be posted on the city webpage before the election. Then it becomes glaringly obvious if there's a candidate that didn't meet the election requirements. I think generally, I suspect that people not following the requirements is more a question of a lack of understanding of what they're supposed to do rather than a malicious attempt to hide who's contributing to them. But regardless, if you're going to have an ordinance, somebody needs to be tracking this stuff and somebody needs to be making sure that people understand what the requirements are and that they're actually complying with the requirements that are put in place. So that's not something to write into the ordinance, but that is something that I think, and I know the governance committee is aware of, and I think that is something the council needs to think about. But just to summarize, I urge you to pass this second reading and moving on to the third and final reading. I think these changes are generally good and an appropriate change to the election campaign ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody on Zoom? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Any discussion from the council? Assistant Mayor.
Question for City Attorney. If, as I agree with the last speaker, if there was a motion to make a change to remove address and just include city or town or municipality that the person resides in, would that be considered, would that delay this?
No.
Okay.
No.
Councilor Moreau.
I just wanted to make a statement about the fact that we did take it off the website because of the fact that there are street addresses, and we didn't want people's personal information being that readily searchable by scammers.
This is a true point. So, if Tom had spoken up the last time, we would have figured it out. But he probably had other things to do now that he's retired, has all this time. So I think that, from an order of operations, if we were to make a change to put it back on the website, but remove the names, I'm guessing that would be
Just the address.
the names,
The addresses, it's just name and town.
name and town, and remove the address. Would that be considered a substantial change enough to require a second reading? Or a fourth second reading?
Or second, this has gone through so many iterations. All of these issues have been present during that, and so I'm going to say no at this point.
Okay, great. That's an awesome answer. So if we would await a motion to publish, or Counselor Cook.
Your Honor, I would move to amend Section I to public records to read, all election financial disclosures shall be public records, and that names and towns of donors shall be published on the city website.
Second?
Names, towns, and amounts.
And
correct?
amounts, yes, sorry, and amounts shall be published on the city website.
Is that still seconded?
Yes.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Your Honor, just a legal inquiry on, just for clarity, I think it was section where it says address. Do we need to change that to city of residence?
Well, we said town in the motion.
Okay. Because it's just in 2 paragraphs.
I know. I'm looking at that to see if one is contradictory to the other. But it's up to you if you want the address on your forms, but not on the website. Or do you want the forms to be consistent with what's required on your website?
I would say city of, or place of residence and amount and date of contribution.
So then you would want to amend paragraph C. Or address meaning
Just take
town,
address out.
not street address.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
All right. So we've passed that, we've made that motion thanks to Tom's great idea. And we are now fully caught up in the changes that we needed to make before. So we can now, if there's no further discussion, wait a motion to pass second reading and hold third and final reading at the December 18th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved. Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Your Honor, can I make a motion to suspend the rules and pass third and final reading?
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Would wait a motion to pass third and final reading.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you, governance.
That made up for the last time we talked about this. Always happy to have public comment. It always has a chance to improve, and it certainly did this evening in removing the address. Certainly helped alleviate the concerns that we all expressed last meeting. All right, City Manager.
Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to take item 5 first, given that there are folks from SIP in the room. So number 5 seeks to establish the Portsmouth Indoor Pool Liquidating Charitable Trust. And here tonight, our SIP board members, Mike Jubert and Chuck Doliak, and Deputy City Manager Suzanne Willen's been assisting them in this effort. So the Save the Indoor Pool, or SIP, seeks to discontinue its existence as a nonprofit corporation. And you will recall that last year the lease and operations agreement with SIP came to an end. SIP no longer has an interest in renewing that. And this year SIP is looking to complete the wind down of its activities by placing the remaining funds, which amount to approximately $185,000, in a city trust to benefit the pool moving forward. And the document referred to as a trust instrument is in your package. And if the city the way it will work is if the city continues to invest in and operate the pool as it is currently doing, the trust will provide matching funds per the agreement for continued capital improvements. And if the city at any point determines not to operate the pool, the funds would be distributed to another 501c3 organization in the area that operates an indoor pool. And I want to call attention to everyone's eye that there was a clerical error in number 4, page 4, that references the incorrect paragraph. It's not paragraph 1C, it's actually paragraph 2, but that is super minor in nature. And I think it's important to note that the pool, through the efforts of SIP, was handed to the effort was handed to the city in great shape. We look to continue that effort because we respect the work that SIP has done, and we want to recognize that they wish to sunset as a group. And the request is to allow for the execution of this trust.
Apologies if, do we need a
Your Honor, I make
motion?
a motion. I recommend that the City Council authorize the city manager to execute the Portsmouth Indoor Pool Liquidating Trust.
Second.
Any further discussion or presentation on this?
No presentation here for questions if anyone has any.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you both for being
Mission is
here.
complete. Pool is saved. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Back to number 1, if that's appropriate. Would be the request for a supplemental appropriation for outside counsel litigation fees. In your packet is narrative that explains and reminds the public that we are involved in 2 complex litigation matters, both of which are handled by outside counsel, both of which require additional funds. And to remind you all, the first is the City versus Sobo Square, or the McIntyre litigation, which is currently in the Superior Court's Business Court. The second is Banfield Road LLC versus the City et al., which is an environmental claim filed against the city and several other parties in federal court. And for each of the 2 matters, there is no dedicated fund from which to pay the ongoing monthly invoices from outside counsel, which have been estimated between now and the end of this fiscal year to total the amount of $450,000. So City Attorney Morrill and I can answer questions, but the request is that the City Council move to schedule a public hearing on this proposed supplemental appropriation from unassigned fund balance of $450,000 for outside counsel legal fees at the next City Council meeting on December 18th, 2023.
Wait, a motion to schedule a public hearing on the proposed supplemental appropriation from unassigned fund balance of $450,000 for outside counsel legal fees.
So moved.
December 18th, 2023 City Council meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Morrell?
I just want to make sure that we publicly confirm that if we move forward with this, if those funds weren't expended for that purpose, then they would end up in the next budget cycle going back into an unassigned fund balance.
Right, they would return to the fund balance, correct?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to verify that because many, when we have a litigation that could be a longer term because of court scheduling, in the future, will we be budgeting for any ongoing litigation?
We will,
If we have that information in advance, so for the budget upcoming for next year, we'll have a good idea for these 2 cases. But these 2 cases were not running at the time that we did our budget for the current fiscal year.
Thank you.
Councilor Tabor?
Question for the city attorney. Could you give us a rough breakout of how much is Attorney Michael Conley for Kane litigation and how much is the,
Well, I could, but I'd prefer not to, and I don't think it's appropriate to discuss because it
Got it.
could reveal some strategy to the extent that the amount that's going to be assessed on either one of these could reflect the work that's going to be going into it.
Right, I was just trying to balance that need with understanding where the $450,000 is going.
At this time, it's not advisable to make that information public.
I understand.
Just to follow up, at some point the information will become public, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
On the invoices, yeah. Okay.
Your question, Your Honor. For legal and city manager, are we expecting any other expenditures in relation to the attempt to acquire the McIntyre building? We had hired, obviously, a third party to try to fight for us to gain that building. So I just want to make sure that we're not expecting any other expenditures.
That is correct, because the council did not authorize any other expenditures other than the ones you have seen to date.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? And we'll also have the opportunity for questions at the public hearing, which we are scheduling for the 18th. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Items 2, 3, and 4 are all seeking similar approvals to their respective memoranda of agreement for the extension of terms. So in item 2, we are looking for approval to approve and accept the proposed MOA memorandum of agreement amendment terms with the Portsmouth Association of Clerical Employees to extend their current collective bargaining agreement for one additional year to June 30th, 2025. And it would be noted that, as the case with PACE or the clerical employees, all three of the extensions I'll discuss tonight otherwise keep current contract language unchanged. So the simple amendment is to extend the terms for one additional year.
We first have a sample, or first, wait a motion to approve and accept the proposal MOA as presented for the Portsmouth School clerical employees.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, wait a motion to approve and accept the proposed MOA as presented for Association of Portsmouth School Teachers.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, I'd wait a motion to approve and accept the proposed MOA as presented for the Portsmouth City Employees, AFSCME, Local 1386A.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thanks very much.
We're on to consent agenda. I'd wait a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? I will just call out just for my own memory, so I don't forget it this year for like the fourth year in a row, the Stiletto Sprint. I'm going to really endeavor to be on there. I even got, like 2 years ago, got stilettos in my size 15. I don't know what those are in women, so I'm going to be there. Going to be there. So, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Maybe we can put a challenge out to the Dover City Council.
We could. That would be,
Big Brothers Big Sisters of New Hampshire.
yeah, that's a great idea. All right, we have a, Bob's gonna love to see Bob in those. I'd wait we have a presentation regarding the Housing Navigator by Howard. Floor is yours.
We have Howard, joined by Kyle Talenti of RKG.
Oh, excellent.
So give me a minute to pull it up, Howard, and feel free to take it away.
Mayor, city manager, councilors, and other members of the public that are in the meeting. I'm here to provide an update on the activity as Housing Navigator. I would like to just remind everybody that my position, as well as the two matters I'll be discussing tonight, are funded through grants that the city was awarded. And the first matter that I'd like to speak to is a public engagement effort that is upcoming in January. Established for the date of January 11th, this public engagement effort will start. What we will be doing for the next 4 to 5 weeks is an outreach effort to notify members of the public that this engagement effort is starting. The effort is being led by Portsmouth Listens. It is a volunteer organization, and I'd like to remind people that Councilor Tabor is on Portsmouth Listens. He invited me to participate with the steering committee in establishing this outreach effort. Everybody with Portsmouth Listens is acting as a volunteer for this outreach effort, and the Housing Navigator position through the grant has hired a professional public facilitator, and she will be helping lead the effort to make sure that the facilitators that are participating in this outreach effort, as well as members of the public and my effort, keeps aligned to our pursuit to understand housing in Portsmouth, both in terms of needs, the challenges, and the expected outcome of this engagement effort will be for recommendations to be given by citizens of Portsmouth to the city administration to understand what actions can be taken in a regulatory and non-regulatory manner in the upcoming year. The second matter I'd like to mention to you tonight, paid through the grant, is a fiscal market analysis, and I have asked Kyle from RKG to come up and give a presentation to you to help explain what this market analysis represents, the methodology to it. And I would like to speak to everybody here that this is an update. We're not here to present any conclusions. We're still in the process of understanding what this analysis means, but later on in January, we'll have the final findings. So in another way to consider this in a broader reach is the public engagement effort. We're reaching out to the citizens to find out from them housing needs and challenges, as well as recommendations. And we have a financial market analysis, and this will be coming forward together late January and informing the council. So I'd like to invite Kyle up here to give his presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. It's good to see you all again. As Howard mentioned, I'm assuming this is the clicker to advance the slides. Yes?
That's me. You'd let me know.
Oh, okay. Next slide, please. We wanted to kind of talk to you about what we were doing. Howard indicated that we're doing a financial feasibility assessment. And really what that means is in order to try and understand what the potential impacts of various inclusionary zoning policies would be, we've been asked to kind of take a look at it through the lens of how it would affect residential development in the community from a financial perspective. As I'm sure you're all aware, housing prices are well above what would be considered affordable housing here in Portsmouth. And so for every unit we ask for to be priced at below market levels, there's going to be a financial impact. And so we were asked to come in and take a look at that and provide an understanding of what some of the sensitivities would be if the city opted to go in any of the number of routes that are on the table. Next slide, please. The methodology we looked at is a traditional pro forma analysis. We looked at a myriad of potential development scenarios, and we're going to go through a couple of those in just a moment as examples. And we collected information both from local sources. We interviewed developers. We spoke with local real estate professionals. We've collected information from proprietary sources like RS Means and Marshall and Swift Valuation Services to understand things like construction costs for developing different types of residential development, operating costs of operating a multifamily facility, and then the revenue potential, which is what can we generate in terms of direct rent or alternative rent incomes like parking, for example, and then for sale prices, right? Because it's not just looking at the for rent market, it's also looking at the for sale market. Next slide, please. So very quickly is one of the things that in our work here historically with the city, we realize that pricing is different in different parts of the city as are costs and some construction realities. And so we looked at the analysis looking at different areas of the city to understand what the impacts would be of a decision making. We did it for a couple of reasons. One, primarily is to understand if we made a choice to make an inclusionary zoning policy that says this required amount of units at this income level, would it have a different impact depending upon the type of project and the location within the community? Understanding that the price for an apartment, for example, is different downtown as it is maybe being out on Route 1 or further west in the city. And so we wanted to be able to bring back to you an understanding of what those potential sensitivities would be so that you can consider either how do we ensure that the policy isn't unnecessarily impactful to one area of the city to another, or one type of development to another, but also then consider, well, then do we set like a bifurcated strategy where you say in area 1, the requirement is this, as opposed to in area 2s and 3 and 4, the requirement is that. So this map just shows you how we broke the city down. We used market information to try and agglomerate like areas, and so that the analysis would be relevant. Next, please. So I just wanted, this is really quick to understand when we're talking about quote unquote affordable housing. Frankly, it's a term that I'm not a huge fan of because affordable is really based on the ability of the renter or the buyer to pay. What is affordable to be may not be affordable to you. What is affordable to you may not be affordable to me. What we're really talking about is price appropriate or price diverse housing, which is how do we look at not just market rate, which is several 100% above the area median income for the city of Portsmouth, but at different ranges. And so this table and this presentation will be made available to all of you. As you can tell, I'm not reading from the slides. There's a lot of information on here. You're more than welcome to view that on your own. And then if you want to ask questions, through Howard, I'm happy to respond to any particular questions you may have about this. But wanted to show you what we're talking about in terms of the incomes of households that we're looking at. And as a result, those impact in particular the revenue side. Because income-controlled housing, if I'm pricing it, for example, to a household earning 80% of area median income, then I have to set a rent that is proportional to 30% of their gross income, which is what is considered cost burden by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. Next, please. So the analysis findings, very simply, the red, so in a pro forma analysis, there's a go, no-go decision, or whether or not a developer is going to want to make an investment in the project. Because everybody is familiar, or almost everybody is familiar with green means go and red means stop. That's why we color-coded the cells as such. But what we wanted to explain here is feasibility varies by project type and location. Not for nothing, but downtown Portsmouth, which has the highest strength in terms of market desirability, then demands the highest price points and highest income and highest rents. And so the feasibility there is a little bit different than in the rest of the city. Typology means the type of construction that you use. There is a substantial cost of construction difference between what's called wood frame construction, where the building is made of 2x4s, 2x6s, and either podium construction, where the first floor is concrete and steel and the above floors are wood frame, or a full concrete and steel, which is generally skyscrapers. The pricing is substantial. And so the impact of that typology impacts feasibility in conjunction with an IZ policy, particularly if you're looking at this graphic. You can do podium construction downtown much more readily than you can in any other parts of the city, mostly because the higher revenue potential of downtown allows you to support a greater construction cost. Whereas if you were to look at the bottom one, which is areas 3 and 4, that's wood frame construction only. We didn't even show podium construction because it's all infeasible, regardless of whether or not you did an IZ, because the revenue isn't strong enough to justify the costs. And so we'll have a much more detailed report. I am trying to be respectful of the time here tonight and trying to give you really the highlights of what we learned. But from this, what we wanted to get to you is feasibility does vary by project and location. So that's something that you're going to want to consider as you move forward with an IZ policy is, do we set it to the most supportive area, understanding that could adversely impact development elsewhere? Do we set it to the areas that have the least financial strength, which as a result will leave opportunity on the table in those that are strong? Do we try and find a balance point? That's one of the things that you all have to consider as you move through this process. Next, please. The target AMI also has an impact, but it's less. So what that means is as you target like 80% of AMI or 70% of AMI or 60% of AMI, obviously the income drops, and as a result, the revenue drops. The impact of increasing what percentage of units has to be income controlled is much more substantial than the impact of going from 80 to 70 or 70 to 60. And that's because the price differential between a market rate unit and even an affordable unit, 80% of AMI, is much different than the price between an 80 and a 70 or 80 and a 60. And so it does have an impact, and you can see here we can get to an area where we start making projects infeasible the further of a discount that we ask for from those price-controlled units. but it's not as sensitive as if we say we went from a 10% requirement of units being set aside to a 15. It's much less impactful to go from 80% of AMI to 70% of AMI. And you can see here it also varies by, once again, location in the city and the typology of construction. Next, please. Ownership is much more polarized. I mean, effectively, because price points for ownership in Portsmouth are so radically different than price points for affordability, really it's only feasible to look at the types of development that you would use a IZ policy for in the downtown area, because the revenue potential on that is so great, you can overcome having to give a small percentage of units for affordability. But we wanted to make sure that we looked at it both from the rental side and from the ownership side. It's similar to what we learned about from the rental side, but it's much more, frankly, polarized from the standpoint of one, it's a no-go no matter what, and the other is a go just because of the price point differences. Next, please. But we also wanted to kind of talk to you about some of the options that you have in front of you, and I call them financial equivalencies, right? Because we're trying to math out what the impact is. And one of the things we looked at is what is the set aside, or what percentage of units have to be income controlled, and then what is the target income that we are going after. And so in the example we gave here is that 10% of the units have to be affordable to households earning 80% of AMI. Well, you can do some financial equivalencies and create a multi-tiered affordability strategy. And I just gave you some examples of when you put them together, they come out to the same financial impact of 10% and 80% of AMI. And the point here is that when we did the analysis, it isn't just one income level that is not being served by market rate development. And there are a number of communities, both here in New England and communities we worked out throughout the United States, where they look at what they call a multi-tiered strategy. We say, well, let's hit a number of different income levels, but try and do it within a manner that keeps it the same financial equivalency, of, in this particular example, 10% of the units at 80% of AMI. And so we're trying to hit a range of them. And so these are just examples. They're not meant to be any sort of recommendation, but we just wanted to show you how you could do it and look at it. And once again, for consideration as you move forward, understanding the fact that it's not just one income level that's not being served here in Portsmouth. If you want to choose to look at different ways of doing that, there are some tools out there that you can use. Next, please. The next one, and I think is really important, is what we define as a sliding scale equivalency, which is if we wanted to target just one income level, we can adjust the set-aside requirement to create it the same, meaning we're not going to create any additional adverse impact on a development project as we adjust. And so if you imagine it's two sliding scales that move counter to each other, the higher the AMI, the higher the percentage of units can be priced. As you get lower AMI, you have to ask for a lower percentage of units to have the same financial equivalency. And so we wanted to give you some ideas of some of the things that I think are going to be brought up as you move forward in this process. Our full report is going to have this and a couple of other ideas for your consideration, but we wanted to show you that there are different ways that you can get at it. And for this particular one, oftentimes people say, well, why would we target a lower AMI in one type of development as opposed to another? If you flip the slide, please. And that's a fantastic question. So oftentimes, the location is going to dictate whether or not you want to serve a more higher income, low income household or a lower income, low income household. The number one is access to transportation. Trying to provide a unit to a household earning 30 or 40 or 50% of AMI in a place where they are required to have a car is much more challenging than if you in a location where there's access to adequate public transportation. Same thing with access to services. Is the grocery store or the retail needs I have walkable? Access to support services. A lot of households, particularly at the 30, 40, 50% of AMI, have needs beyond just a more affordable place to live. And so as you're looking at projects here in the city, depending upon where it's located, you may say, hey, this location, based on these criteria, suits well to serving really low-income households. And so can we do that? Well, we can't ask for the same 10% and have the same financial impact. And so maybe we have to look at those trade-offs. And so once again, these are just some ideas that are coming forth through this process that we wanted to share with you all as you start thinking about solutions, is that there are different ways, if you will, forgive my saying, but to skin the cat. There's different ways that you can get at what you're trying to accomplish, and hopefully through our analysis, and when you get the full report and are able to review it, and then as you get through the public engagement process and kind of hear what the community is thinking, you can start coming up with solutions that are going to truly address the need, because the need is on a continuum. It is not a single income or a single group of people or a single age of person or size of household. The need is substantial. And so creating strategies that can try and address as much as that as you can in locations that are the most appropriate is hopefully the advice and the direction we can help you get to, while also maintaining or avoiding adversely impacting development in your community. Because I don't think that the solution is let's just not have any housing development, because that also impacts affordability when you restrict supply, but you continue to see growth in demand. Those are the highlights from what we're doing. I want to thank you all for the time to be here this evening. I'm happy to answer if you have any questions. And like I said, as you dive into this more and you have questions even beyond tonight, I'm happy to respond to those through Howard as well.
Thank you, Kyle. Councilor Moreau.
Thank you so much for all this information. I've been waiting for this kind of information to come forward as we start to look at all of our zoning. Something I've been talking about, and I'm really hoping the information you're gathering is going to help us get there, is I'd love the city to be able to create a housing trust and be able to create payments in lieu for development, and the ability to fund the housing trust that way so that we can help homeowners in other ways. Will this information help us get to that point?
Yes, and so one of the strategies we'll talk about in more detail is what a payment in lieu is, and not everybody will know what that is. And also we'll talk about, well, when do you want to apply it, right? Because even that, within your community, you have to decide whether or not you're willing to accept a cash payment in lieu of those units being developed. And then how do you calculate what the price is to buy out of those units? Now, part of that multi-area analysis we did was just try and say, well, maybe there's a different price point depending upon where you are in the city, because the gap between that market rate, we're creating more value for you in certain areas of the city than we are in others. And so, yes, we're going to have that information in there. I will tell you, though, Councilman Moreau, it's a value determination. A lot of communities we work in don't like the payment in lieu because they want to see affordability everywhere. And the fear is in the areas that are the most expensive, we'll take the cash, but those are also usually the most desirable places to live. And so, once again, it gets back to the priorities that you as a community have, and then having the information to say, okay, well, if we are going to accept a payment in lieu, should Area 1 have a payment of X as opposed to Area 2, which has a payment of Y, to be fair, right? Because it's not about being punitive here. It's about trying to create the opportunity for more affordable housing within a manner that also doesn't disrupt the development of new housing in the community altogether.
Thank you.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a comment first, then I'll have a question. I was really happy to see how you've laid it out with kind of a go, no go. You know, when we sit here and think about affordable housing or workforce housing, we always think more units for a lower AMI is ideal, but this shows clearly that when you're a builder or if you're an investor, if you sit down and you look at the numbers, you know, more units means it may not be feasible, so you just don't do it. Or a lower AMI may not be feasible, so you just don't do it. So this gives a really clear and easy to understand where the go, no goes are. The question I have, and I'm glad that you included it at the end of the report, was about the transportation component, because we know that parking adds a lot of cost to building, and areas where you don't necessarily require a car could serve AMIs that are lower. Is there kind of a 40% AMI, 60% AMI? Is there a line where you kind of say, this AMI you need a car, this AMI you probably don't need a car, and these two, it's murky?
Well, sadly, in our country, generally most people need a car regardless, because there isn't really a one good area that satisfies all your needs. That being said, is sometimes you need to do trade-offs in areas where you get the most amount of what you need, that it doesn't require a car, and then you rely on either public transportation or other means to get the other stuff you need to do. I would say that there isn't really a line per se, but I think where you're going, Councilor Bagley, is as you get towards those lower AMIs, the ability to be able to spend 30% of your income on housing and then also be able to afford the luxury of having a vehicle becomes much more and more challenging. And so the lower down that pole you go, the more likely the less likely you're going to be able to afford both, and then you're starting to having to choose on sacrificing other expenses that you may need to pay in order to be able to have both the housing, even at 30% of your income, and then also a means of transportation to get places. And so I would say when you're looking at a policy for the city in areas where it's served or it's in walking proximity to, say, a bus stop or to a better transportation system, I would be inclined to look at how do we try and get to a lower target income, because those are folks that are going to be more challenged to be able to afford and maintain a car within the paradigm of all the other expenses you have in life.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is kind of a follow-up to Councilor Bagley's question. This analysis, does it assume parking requirements for all of these types of buildings?
It follows your zoning. So if there's
Okay.
requirements in the zoning, there's requirements in the model, because we want it to be as accurate to what the situation is as we have today.
So the follow-on question then is, if we didn't have parking requirements,
Yep.
how would that alter this study?
If I did not have to pay to build parking, it would lower my costs, which would increase my returns, which would create greater flexibility in how I get to a go decision depending upon the strategy. It's a financial thing. If I don't have to pay for parking, that reduces my cost, that increases my return, all things being equal. And as a result, if some other cost came in and took up that spot, it would be an equal financial impact. There are a lot of communities, if I'm understanding where you're going, Councilor Cook, there are a lot of communities that reduce or waive parking requirements in an attempt to try and get greater affordability, understanding the cost savings that they create.
Thank you.
Mrs. Mayor.
A new question, based on your last statement. Do you find, or have you worked with communities, or is there research that support the communities that do that effort, the effort of putting in lower parking to reduce costs and then for increase the amount of potentially below market rate units? Are there communities that has shown positive?
Yes, and those are communities where those projects are located in an area that are well served with public transportation, to where someone wanting to live there would be comfortable not having a car. And I say that with all due deference, for a lot of times it's in urban areas. So we just wrapped up a little while ago the IDP, the Inclusionary Development Policy update for the city of Boston. And there are definitely areas within the city of Boston where a car is not required, and you are able to get around and accomplish the things you need in life without owning one. Access to the T, for example, is a tremendous benefit to that. I'm not aware of Portsmouth having its own public rail system, so I say that, yes, you can do that. I would say, from my analysis, a reduction in parking might be more palatable than just elimination altogether. I'm not sure you're going to have a success with a wide range program of eliminating parking altogether. I think that would, after a while, your demand will start dwindling, because there aren't a ton of places I'm trying to say this as politely as possible. There aren't a ton of places in Portsmouth where I can be comfortable not owning a car.
I think sometimes the easier thing to say is there's not a ton of places in New Hampshire that
That's fair.
you can
That's
live
fair.
comfortably
That's fair.
without your own mode of transportation.
Yes.
That is all seasons. Question this maybe for you or more for Howard. I'm looking for a little bit more of an expanse of what we hope to inform the public and gather from the public from the Portsmouth Listen sessions. Are we looking to gather their opinion on some of these sub areas? Are we I guess I'm trying to figure out
Right.
what
So
information we're trying to express.
what Kyle was speaking to is really separate, but they'll merge information with data and opinion later on in January. The public engagement effort was we're all aware there's a housing problem, and there's perceptions about that housing problem. We're gathering through this financial market analysis some really good data about affordability and future development. But we wanted to reach out to the citizens in the city and gain an understanding from their perspective what they consider the housing needs, what they consider to be the challenges and what they consider to be viable decisions that the city can make to address those. So the format is going to be, the first meeting is going to be a kickoff event open to the public. We're going to be sending out, I've been working with Monty and the communication aspect of things with the city to facilitate a press release. We're going to be putting out a survey to make people aware of this event and start soliciting information from them about these needs and challenges. And after that kickoff event, there's going to be a series of study circles where they're going to gather, and they're going to exchange opinions that will be in agreement with each other and not in agreement. So there's a belief that a cross-pollinization is going to happen. So when the challenges are being spoken about and recommendations are made, that it's going to be something that the public will feel comfortable the city acting upon.
I guess, well, I think public engagement is the highest of importance. My concern is that is this a repetitive study of what was done in 2017? Are we gonna, because there was a Portsmouth Listens housing study done in 2017. It sounds like based on the same exact information you're trying to, like this new one is trying to do. So I guess that's where the only level of my concern is are we spending time repeating the same thing to get the same information? Obviously we know like a housing study was done last year. So I would ask Portsmouth Listens, yourself, whoever is involved in formulating these questions in these series of events, to make sure that we are looking at the 2017 and maybe growing upon that without, wasting too much time with new questions or new trying to pull new information that we already have.
So I would say the 2017 survey, a lot has happened in the last 6 years. So the need and the challenges have shifted a little bit, but it's still been part of our consideration in research.
Yep.
The housing study that you spoke about, also performed by RKG, was more aligned with directions with the Portsmouth Housing Authority. But again, there is a basis for that in our public engagement effort. And Councilor Tabor, as a representative of the steering committee, can speak a little bit too.
Your Honor, if I could. Back in June, Nick Cracknell and Howard came to Jim Nukas and me and said it would be helpful to have a Portsmouth Listens dialogue. I think this discussion we just had about parking illustrates why there's a need to engage the public. We've wrestled with this for a long time, but we haven't necessarily brought the public along to our level of understanding. And so I think the purpose of this is, first of all, to get, if we can get 90, 100, 120 citizens and educate them on a Housing 101 night, and then go through the study circle process so that we build the understanding of the need. Because when you get people to talk to one another from their own background, somebody in their 60s talking to somebody in their 20s who can't afford a place to live, you get a better understanding of the overall need. There's a different need for somebody working in their 20s downtown at a service industry, from a young family trying to get their first house, to somebody in their 60s trying to downsize and find a house they can afford in Portsmouth. If everybody talks in those study circles to more completely understand the need, then the question becomes, what are the best ways to solve the problem? And what's our vision of a community where the most people can afford a place to live at all those different stages of life. And I think that discussion creates an overall awareness so that when we put together the data and some zoning strategies, there's an understanding of the need, and many of the citizen solutions will echo what we'll do with policy. So that's the hope. And I think if we have 90, 100, 110 people, that ripples out to friends and neighbors. That builds awareness. And I think it's very easy for us to want to lead with a solution. You know, let's lead with this solution. We'll do this right now. But if the community says, that's going to affect me on my street if you change my parking, well, we haven't created the understanding of the need to a sufficient degree that we'll get widespread buy-in for these policies. So I think it's essential, or I think it's desirable, to have engage our citizens so that they come up to the level of understanding, or at least approach the level of understanding that we have on all these problems. Then you get better buy-in for the policy solutions that you want.
Councilor Moreau, then.
Just to sort of follow up on that, I would like to see us take the direction of considering that there was the Portsmouth Housing Authority study done. There was also a regional plan that was done most recently. I'd like us to be able to take some of those bits of information and educate the public with those and get their feedback as to whether or not, you know, we sit in with some of those statistics, right? Let's say, you know, whatever the statistic be, and I can't pull one out of the air, but, you know, this is what the region's sort of thinking as far as a certain aspect goes, and then what does our community, do we fall in line with that and get the feedback in that direction, I think would be a unique way to look at it.
Sister Mayor.
Thank you. And I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that we shouldn't go out into the public. I'm just saying that I don't want to make sure that, you know, I would like to see Portsmouth Listens and this working group look at what was done in 2017, look at their report, and then go from there, see what has been addressed, see what hasn't been addressed. I mean, looking at the report back right now, everything you mentioned was talked about in 2017. Low-income residents, individuals with physical, mental, and developmental disabilities, young professionals, dual income with no kids, with kids, single income with kids, students living with or without roommates, fixed income, mature residents who are both employed, retired, parking requirements, safe commuting systems, creating permanently affordable housing. Just what I just want to make sure is that we're not just doing the same thing to then not lead to solutions. So I guess what I'm saying is that I want to make sure Portsmouth Listens is looking back at the work that they have done and making sure that we are developing clear, you know, not necessarily action plans out of that, because there were action plans developed in 2017, but I guess looking back and analyzing the data that has already been done, from the work that it's already been done, to make sure that we are not, again, just repeating the same cycle of we're going to spend months and months and have, you know, hopefully hundreds of residents give their input, and then it's going to come. I mean, because we could all say from 2017, you know, what in our city and our policies have we done from the hundreds of individuals that, you know, came and took place into these three working groups. So I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm probably not saying it as clear as I'm thinking it, but I just want to make sure that we, you know, at the end of this, are we going to end up with a document that, you know, like I'm looking at right now in front of me, where that identifies, you know, figuring out town centers, the multi-use gateway expansion, you know, which is something that will be coming forward from the land use committee. What type of environment people want to live in? Where can we live? Who can act? I hope I'm getting my point across without sounding so stubborn. That I'm just, I just
this is
don't
not
want
a
us
retread.
Yes.
So it is certainly using the 2017 and previous studies as recently as last year through Rockingham and everything else as a basis of how to proceed. So it's an effort to really bring all this to current.
Thank you.
And
Councilor Cook, then.
I share many of the concerns of the assistant mayor, but one of the things I'm particularly concerned about having another listening session, I think it's incredibly valuable to gather information from the public. But usually the people who choose to attend that's a very self-selecting group. And I want to make sure that we're collecting demographic data from everybody who's attending, financial data, housing data, so that we know what that group is representative of. Because we can take their recommendations, but their recommendations might not be representative not only of our community, but especially of those most in need. Because those who truly are struggling with housing usually don't have the time to attend a listening session or participate in these programs. So that's what my concern is. We really struggle at the city level to collect very good data when we're doing public outreach, because the groups that do always report to us or have time to take a survey or show up at a meeting are a very self-selecting group of people who have free time to do that. So I want to make sure that we're not, again, playing into that group that is frankly fairly privileged to have that time.
We're certainly aware that we don't want to establish focus groups. We want to have the distribution of information going out about this event is going to be going to all the residential addresses. There's going to be a survey that's going to collect their interest in why they want to participate, as well as some parameters of their households, so we can mix and match and get, as was spoken to, the retirees and the younger people to be able to speak and have, as I mentioned, this cross-pollinization about, well, my need is this, and this is the reason why, so the other people can hear it. It is certainly not an intent to have any focus groups come in and just own one of these study circles. There's going to be a distribution across the different ones. We're hoping there's going to be a lot of people that can attend. We're offering up attendance either in person or a hybrid or by remote. We're also developing an effort to outreach to those that are unable to attend for whatever reason it may be, with some type of input survey that they can go and give responses to some of these questions. So it's certainly an effort to include as many people of the population as we can.
Thank you.
Councilor Bagley and Councilor Tabor.
Thank you, Aaron. I just want to kind of echo the same sentiments of the Assistant Mayor and Councilor Cook. You know, 2 years goes by very, very quickly, and if we spend a lot of time on this, we're not going to have time to accomplish the goals. So I would just like a commitment that we get this part, the survey and the Portsmouth Listens part, you know, that we do it in an expeditious manner so that there's plenty of time to move on whatever comes out of that process.
Absolutely agreed. We have tried to time it to maximize availability of people that do have an interest. So we're, as I mentioned, hoping to start the effort and end the effort before February break. And so every week there's an effort to keep it moving, progress to be made. And I'm coordinating with Kyle and RKG and having their financial analysis done. So all this can be brought together really to bear in the beginning of March.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Your Honor, to the Assistant Mayor's point, the 2017 effort, Portsmouth Listens effort, did have all the things that you read. And the council approved a housing policy at the time. To make the housing policy make changes requires changing zoning. And, you know, aside from the form-based zoning change in 2017, not much more was done. And I think this...
Since last year.
I was going to say, I feel the land use would disagree with
Gateway's
you.
been huge.
Yeah, right. Well, there's a lot of stuff pending. my point was, from 2017 until this council, not much was done. This council has a land use committee, has already moved on ADUs, is looking at gateway districts, is looking at, a surplus of industrial research property, looking at all those things. That's the difference to me. The difference is we can take the citizen engagement and work it into the zoning with the RKG data. The second point I would want to make is that I don't think this should stay our hand if opportunities come up from Portsmouth Housing.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, we've got, I think this was a huge issue in the election. I think the election results make it clear that if opportunities come up to create workforce housing, we as a council should move on that.
I just want to also add or re-emphasize the idea that outcomes are going to be regulatory, such as the zoning, as well as non-regulatory, such as the Affordable Housing Trust. So it's to gather all this information and understand all the other tools that can be used.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just hammering it home one last time. I just want to make sure that whether that means that we are sending this out because I really think that if more residents saw the 2017, there's so much information here. Portsmouth Listen did such a great job of capturing so much of the need and breaking down and explaining a lot of the data that was pulled from the group and a lot of the data that was given to the group. But I just want to make sure, and I'm sure you are, that you are using this as a reference because I think it's also so important to say, in the 2024 study group, we are finding mostly the same exact information that we found in the 2017, and now, we can take that data that is now, codified again years later, to show that we need to be more aggressive in some of these zonings. Right here it says the group supports the city using city property to create under market value housing. So again, reminding people as they're participating in this that this is not new. These are not new ideas. These are ideas that have been solidified time and time again. That's all. Just beating a dead horse. I'm really good at it.
Well, thank you, Howard. I'll just.
I do support it.
I'd like to. Well, there's no motion, so we don't have to support anything. But I think that there's a broad thanks for the work that you do, Howard, and Kyle. It's always impressive to hear you rattle off numbers and figures in a way that makes it sound like everybody should know. Like all of these, I've color-coded them for you, but I don't know, do we even need to have these color codes on there? 15%, 16%. So I really do, I appreciate that. I have some things that I hope that we can work to in this listening session. One, around engagement. I am a definite believer of, I see and I forget, I hear and I remember, I do and I understand. 6 years has gone by. There's things that we need to engage in terms of the zoning, and we need to do more zoning. And luckily, we have a master plan that kicks off this year, so the timing seems appropriate to get a lot of people doing some of this work and understanding it on a factual basis. To then come out to those work sessions that are going to be hosted by the planning board. To make sure that we're engaging on our master plan and it really aligns to our values, because everyone said it, and I'll repeat it, with your running for city council, almost to a person, I think 16 out of 17 all said, hey, we want to see more affordable housing here. Like that's something that I think is, in 6 years that's passed since the last study, I think that is more acutely aware in everybody's mindset that Portsmouth breaks if we can't figure out a way to have more people live here that represent different levels of income. I'd also I hope that, and I trust the Portsmouth listens, we're not all going to be Howards or Kyles leaving there. And our plan cannot be to train everybody in Portsmouth to then go apply to be housing advocates or work for firms like RKG. It has to be boiled down into what is, the bumper sticker on this. And some of that expertise, I'll give an example like, hey, why can't you just make people build affordable housing? Well, in New Hampshire, we don't have that stick available to us. So if we want more affordable housing, we have to provide incentives and incentive-based codes. And, they would say, well, why don't you just make them really hard and then they won't build anything. And again, there'd be most people in Portsmouth, I think, would still, hey, if you can't make it all affordable, and they can't build anything, what's so wrong with that? Well, turns out, in 20 years, we will see the effects of that. And it's a really difficult concept to hold, and one that you have to have a lot of experience to do in order to hold that. So that expertise, I really hope that we're going to be able to break that down into a way that folks are going to be able to walk away with those tidbits and understanding, so that they're going to be engaging in the master plan. Because I look at this as an opportunity to help train Portsmouth up on housing, so that when the master planning sessions start in earnest, people are engaged and they're saying, yes, this is what I'd like. Yes, this is why 1.5 parking spots for this development works instead of the maximum. And then I would echo the assistant mayor's point, and I think everyone's point on here. We do have solutions that are identified. I think that this is in no way, at least from my view, standing in the way of the city council already implementing solutions that we have seen and we've already identified as a need. I plan to, and I think I speak for all of us, we plan to move forward with those solutions as we see them, but we're going to be limited in the true, we're not going to, if we're talking 40 units, talking 400 units, at the next site, we're not going to solve housing unless, some of the market comes along with that. That's only going to happen with zoning, and that's going to only happen if we get everybody engaged in zoning and that process. And I really hope this is like a boot camp for the master planning process of folks to come in and understand what's possible, market feasibility, et cetera, New Hampshire RSAs to allow us to really make that master plan that doesn't come around but once a decade, really impactful. So, that's if we had done the 2016 study before we did the master plan instead of immediately following it, we might have had a different outcome when it comes to the master plan. I'm hoping that the timing is better on this one and that some of these changes are going to actually make it into the master plan. So,
agreed.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for sticking around. I caused you 4 more minutes after a long night, but always good to see you, Howard. Thank you, Kyle.
Can we take a quick break?
Oh, okay. Can we please pass email correspondence first?
Sure. Move.
Wait. Okay. To accept and place on file.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we will recess for 7 minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. On to the council agenda. We have, first under my name, holiday parking. I'd await a motion to authorize the city manager to establish free holiday parking from December 16th to December 24th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Morrow.
I would really like to not do the on-street. I would rather there be free parking that businesses, for people that actually go in and shop in their stores or eat in their restaurants, could actually stamp their tickets and give them a certain amount of time free instead. I think it would be easier to do it that way, and it would actually encourage people to go and shop and eat.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I would echo Councilor Morrow's comments. Historically, we've done free on-street parking, yet you continue to pay in the garages. And what that does is it effectively ties up the on-street parking in front of the stores with long-term parkers who park there throughout the day. And our short-term parkers then can't find parking, have to go to the garage where they end up paying. The other thing to note is over 50% of our on-street parking is now paid with Park Mobile, and over 90% of the people who use Park Mobile are from out of town. So this is one of the very few things that the state of New Hampshire gives us where we can get revenue from tourists and shoppers and then improve our downtown with that. So we provide the snow plowing downtown, the trash pickup, keeping the areas clean, paving of the parking lots with parking revenue. But this isn't really about parking revenue. What this is about is kind of a give back at the holidays. And I think it makes a lot more sense to provide free parking on our two garages and maintain the standard parking on the streets, which is historically different than what we've done in the past.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley. Assistant Mayor.
I guess this would, maybe not for this, because I'm going to support full-heartedly this motion, but I guess would be a report back from Ben Fletcher or PTS on the ability to validate parking, because I've always been under the impression when we've tried to do any type of, bring people downtown, whether this was in the discussions with just the retail event that, Sean Clancy and the chamber, and I was in some of the start of the meetings, talked about trying to do holiday validating, and I was under the impression that was difficult to be done in the garages, but it seems like there were two counselors recommending that. So I guess I would like a report back on that separately, because I have always been under the impression for the last 2 years that is not what has come back.
I can speak to that, and Ben Fletcher is on Zoom if we'd like to bring him in.
Yeah, Ben.
As Ben explained to me, what happens when you drive into either of the garages, if you circle the garage, can't find a spot, or choose to leave within 15 minutes, that's your grace period.
Yes.
What we can do is we can reprogram the credit card machines and the payment machines to change that 15 minutes to 3 hours. So rather than go through the hassle of trying to prove a validation on a ticket, we could make gratis the first 3 hours of anybody's parking stay in a garage, and then beyond that, they'd pay the differential, and if they stay less than 3 hours, it's free.
Another question, and this may be a Ben question, or Andrew, maybe you know the answer. What are the quantities of spots, so on-street spots compared to the garages?
That's probably more a Ben question, but traditionally we have about 900 spaces in High Hanover, but 300 of them are under rehabilitation. We also have long-term parkers who we reserve spots for, but that's constantly in flux, and we do calculations. And then at Foundry, I believe it's about 600 spaces.
Right. So currently we
So I
have
guess-
1,200 available in the two garages currently.
Okay, and then Ben, how many on-street?
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Ben.
Am I being able to be heard?
Yes, you are.
It's roughly 1,400.
On street.
1,400.
1,400
Top of my head.
on-street,
Top of my head, yeah.
and roughly available right now, 1,200 in the garage?
So 14, 12, 26. Not quite then. No, not quite. It's less on street. So I was not prepared for that question. It's
You're on here for a
been
loop.
fluctuating over the years, so I apologize for that.
It's okay.
That's about even.
Your Honor.
Well,
Maybe, Ben, could you say, is it roughly equal on-street and garage parking, within 100 or so?
It's fairly equal, yes.
okay.
I can draw up exact numbers for you if you want to wait for a minute.
And is there, I heard, is the rationale that you're saying, Councilor Bagley, is that coming from PTS and the parking department, or is that just a personal preference?
I would not say it's coming from PTS. It's coming from parking experts such as Donald Shoup and Henry Graber, and generally people that study parking. You don't want to give away your premium product for free and charge for your less desirable parking.
Do you
Parking.
I guess that opens up the question of, we considered our garage the secondary parking, and in Orange Street our
Yes, and the reason that we consider it that way is,
I guess that, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
That was a question for Ben.
It is our premium product because it's perceived, particularly perceived, but it's closer to the storefront that you might want to go into, and there's no perceived hassle of going into the garage, certainly in Hanover with all those signage and changes that are happening, and having to go find a space and then find go to the elevator, take it down or take the stairs down, and then take the street to where you want to go. People perceive it to be a lot more high demand parking is on street.
And so, and just a point of clarification, the on street would be free for 3 hours?
It depends on what you guys decide to do. It would be a lot cleaner to do a 3-hour grace period in each garage, and then the devices would automatically calculate overstay time on that. With the on-street situation, what you have to do is you have to chalk every single car. You have to check every single car for a payment. Then you would have to see if it go into the chalking module, which is electronic. We don't actually chalk a tire anymore. And then you would have to then go to mark the vehicle as chalked, and then go back to the vehicle within the 3-hour time period and perform that task again. And if they were overstayed and they had to move their vehicle, then you would cite that vehicle for non-payment if there was no payment on the vehicle. The situation is it's a lot more labor intensive to do it that way. It's a lot less exact to do it that way. You have confrontations that way when people get upset that they were only a few minutes over, and so on and so on. All of that is avoided when parking in the garages.
Or, Ben, just to clarify, we could just not enforce the 3-hour limit and just have free parking and repurpose parking staff to do something else for the
week and a half.
Not even. It's
7 days.
8 days. So I guess what I would like to see.
Yes, may I speak to that?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, forgive me for interrupting, but to speak to that, the city has given us a mandate to enforce the 3-hour turnover to the advantages of businesses. And when you don't enforce that turnover and you just give free parking, you just get nothing but gridlock, and employees and owners just park in front. We had a lot of owners last year that complained that they were not getting turnover in front of their stores because we weren't enforcing for the first 3 hours. And so I would encourage whatever we do that it would remain a 3-hour limit for anything free, whether it's on the street or otherwise.
Yep.
It would.
Thank you, Ben. I would, I guess, politely disagree with that, because I feel like the only way we're going to get to what Councilor Moreau and what Councilor Bagley want is if we have the business owners, the storefronts, saying we want to change, because we are doing this conceivably for the goodwill that giving away free parking is going to have. And there's certainly a number of storefronts that still continue to believe, rightly or wrongly, that free parking in the premium spot, because we're a premium city and we're not going to give away our second-class parking as a holiday gift. We're going to give away, what we believe to be our best as a gift to entice folks to come in. If there is a desire to have this change, I don't believe it could come from the city council as an edict of what we're going to change the tradition of. And more, I'd like to see this as response to, the store owners and the small businesses saying, hey, here are the undersigned, we would like to see this changed in 2024. The first 400 years we gave away street parking. The next 400 years we want to give away garage parking. And I don't think by having the 3-hour limit, which I don't recall, I think at least 10 years ago, it was just you had free parking, and we repurposed the troops to do something else, and we just took a time for meter maids and confrontations around the holidays, or parking enforcement officers, and we just said, hey, we're gonna do something else, and parking is not a revenue center for these 8 days, and we'll go back to it after Christmas. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually share the concerns about parking on the street, not turning over. In fact, many of the conversations I had last year with business owners when I was having to walk downtown because there was no parking available to me was that they were all so excited because they got to park on the street all day long and leave their cars on the street all day long. And
give them a break.
they were talking about how full the streets were with cars. And I said, well, you parked on the street. And they said, yes. And I said, well, are you shopping? Well, no, I'm working here. All my staff got to park on the street, so they got free parking. I'm like, well, that's great for your staff, but it means fewer people are shopping in your stores. And I think that that's the message that people aren't necessarily getting, is that the only time of the year that it's almost impossible to get parking downtown is this week, when it's the most important week of the year for them to have shoppers coming into their stores. So I think we have to be really careful, because the intent of our parking program is not to collect revenue. The intent of the parking program is to make sure that we have adequate turnover so that people are shopping in our businesses downtown. And maybe it's an education campaign that we need more than anything, but we don't help provide that education by continuing a tradition that doesn't necessarily serve our businesses downtown.
Assistant Mayor.
I think there's
Councilor
multiple
Bergen.
ways to serve the business community downtown, and if that means a business owner who normally parks in the garage, or someone like me who pays for their staff to park, in the Foundry garage or something like that, if a business owner is not going to do something that is going to harm them during their potentially busiest time of the year, so I think that I think your story is a great example of. There's more way to help them. You're helping them by having shoppers come downtown and potentially park for free. You're maybe helping them by letting them have a few hours of free parking. I think that who are we to say, what can or cannot help them, or to say like, hey, you're harming yourself. I think that can be deemed as, just unnecessary. So I think that this is how it's always been. I think it's worked. I think most people like it. I've talked to a lot of the parking enforcement officers, as the staff, as I see them walking down the street all the day, most of them have asked me in the last few weeks, oh, are you guys going to do this? Are you guys going to do this? So I think obviously there can be divided support in the council, but while I'm not in disagreement that potentially maybe next year we try the parking garage, I just think that I'm not comfortable moving forward with that right now.
Councilor Bagley, then Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Your Honor. I guess, what did Henry Ford say? If asked the people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. If you ask somebody if they want free parking, they're going to say yes. I think the question you have to ask is, do you want more customers or free parking? And there is not anecdotal data. There are reams and reams of data that say short-term turnover on storefront parking is the most ideal economic vitality. It actually shows that if walkers and bicyclists bring more revenue to town than cars do, because cars are typically driven by one person, and you can only park one car per spot where you can
Our
park.
town or
Just in general. Okay. So what drives the revenue is the people on the streets once they leave their vehicles. And by providing free long-term parking in the garages and paid short-term parking in front of the stores, we're going to see more economic activity downtown. And there is reams of data that support that.
I guess there are reams of data that support that these 8 days have been beneficial to businesses too.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Councilor Tabor, then Councilor Denton.
My point is made.
We've got this whole great system we've developed, starting with stay and pay. And as you say, 90% of the people who use the app are non-residents. Those non-residents pull into a parking space at 3 hours, they get a text message saying your rate is going to go up, they move their car. And we've never had turnover in the downtown street parking as good as it is right now. And you can actually go downtown and find a parking space. So I think that system is working, and it's evolved. to serve the needs of the downtown, and I like the idea of giving the garage space away. I think that's because people in the garage park once, and they're on foot downtown, carrying bags of things they bought. And I think that's a good outcome, too.
Councilor Denton.
Your Honor, I'm going to offer an amendment. So this reads, move to authorize the city manager to establish 3 hours of free holiday parking in the garages from December 16th to December 24th.
Second.
And if I could speak to that, I've been on multiple councils, and they've all have done different things. I've been on councils that have done 10 days free parking downtown. I've been on councils that have done nothing, no free parking for the holidays. And just based on the data and based on everything I've learned in the past 8 years of being up here, more or less, the idea of utilizing the assets that we have in the garage makes the most sense to me.
So
I'll pass the gavel to the Assistant Mayor. So,
We can't validate again.
I don't think that it's wise to make decisions based on what we believe the business owners need. I've yet to have a conversation with a business owner that said, hey, Diggs, or usually Mr. Mayor, because they can't pronounce my name, come to me and say, you know what, I need more turnover. Can you do away with the free parking that you guys are planning for the holidays? I have been on councils that have not done the free parking on the streets, and I remember distinctly what the reaction of the populace at large was. It was, I can't believe the city of Portsmouth needs to nickel and dime me from any more money. Now, being on the dais, you realize that it's all about turnover, and academically, the reams of data will show you that you're right. And here is where I'm trying to implore you that politics is not looking at reams of data and making decisions. It is understanding that we govern by the consent of the governed. And I cannot believe that I'm getting this animated about parking holiday, but the idea that we are going to do what we believe is better for the business owners, to make a point that what they actually need, instead of free parking, the premium parking, is that they need more turnover downtown, seems exactly what government does poorly. It leads instead of meets the needs. And I heard Ben say explicitly, please don't change it to 3 hours, because then we'll not have any turnover. In my mind, that's exactly what we should be doing. We have a great system. This is a good way to test it, a good way to show that the stay and pay works well to turnover. And we could go back next year with that data and say, hey, these are as fewer cars that you had here. Please, come to us now and please request that we shift that. Otherwise, this is going to be a failed experiment. We are going to switch back to next year to holiday parking because there will be a bunch of people that are angry and thinking that they're not watching Channel 22. They are going to find out, that we did not do free parking and that we're going to put them in the garages. This is not about turnover. This is about saying we're going to take a break from enforcing parking because we all experience the joy of going to a city that doesn't have the same demands on their parking inventory as us. We all know that feeling when we find a spot that's free. We don't have to pay for parking. It's typically in a very small town, small city, and we enjoy that. We know that we can't live in that world because we have to have turnover, and we do 358 days a year. What I am asking is that we understand that what we're not doing here is following the data. We are following our hearts, that we know that what we are giving away is a premium product and not what is better for the small businesses, because I would always trust the small businesses to know what's better for them than us up here. Councilor Lombardi and then Councilor Moreau.
I would agree with you, Mayor. I think that the reaction of the people, the community, on that year, and I think it was just 1 year, that there was no free parking, people were shocked. They said, "What's going on?" I think it is something that the residents expect at this point. The other thing is that non-residents tend to pay anyway. And so we're not losing revenue during that time.
I don't know what that sound was.
It must be Ben.
It was
at the
outside.
garage.
Oh, great. I think it was a police car outside.
So I would say stay the course and have the premium parking 3 hours free. Maybe 2 hours it would be better, but I don't know. But I think it works.
Councilor Moreau.
Being the lone vote no against holiday parking last year, this was my idea at that point. I really thought that I was a small business owner in downtown for 6 years, and that's exactly the problem as small business, especially a services business that need clients to be able to get to my establishment. It was the problem and the reason I left downtown, on top of high costs. But the holidays were the worst. I mean, I, even as a business owner who sometimes has to come and go, would have a hard time finding even a short-term parking spot to go into my office. So I perceive it as a problem that I actually experienced, and therefore I would only vote in the positive to do it in the garage, and I will vote no against anything on street.
Well, there'll be lots of spaces in the garage.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I think I'll support Councilor Stenton's motion. The distinction between this and previous years is we have roughly the same number of on-street spaces as garage spaces. And what we're doing is we're offering free parking in the garages instead of on the street. So it's not that we're not offering free parking. It's that we're offering it in a different manner.
It's called a vote.
What is the motion, Josh's?
The motion is to move to authorize the city manager to establish 3 hours of free holiday parking in the garages from December 16th to December 24th.
Just to clarify, that's through December 24th, right? I just want to make sure.
Correct.
Okay, through.
25th is free anyways.
Yep.
What, if anything, what is the expected revenue? I would like to see if we can't extend this longer, if we're going to have, to make it equal on the revenue side. Ben, do you know how much we lose? If we can start this, if we can start this sooner and keep it for the rest of December, I'd just like to make sure that everybody in Portsmouth knows it's not a revenue standpoint. So we expect to lose the same amount of revenue either way.
Ben shared a number with me. Typically, we lose 300,000, and I believe that's when we do the on-street parking for give or take 10 of the days in the holiday timeframe. Ben, is that correct? That's where that $300,000 figure came from? What we don't know is the calculation of between here and Christmas in the garages.
I would extend it, we could extend it to the end of the year, right?
January 1st?
Yeah.
Or December 31st.
So we're talking about the additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days.
Because January 1st is a holiday.
11 versus 6.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to get any, people are going to be probably pretty ticked about it at the beginning. So I would like to do it as soon as possible to the end of the year to show that this is.
I guess it's how long does the city need to get it going?
Ben is off mute. Ben, have you heard the current conversation, which is to effectuate it immediately through January 1st. And I believe the motion would be in the garages. And
Correct.
the question is, how much lead time do you need to reprogram things?
That is subjective to each garage and the response time we get from the vendors. I'd say at Foundry probably almost immediately. Take a little bit longer at Hanover. What is it? Monday. I would hope that by the end of this week it would be able to be done.
So as soon as possible, instead of a date.
That's good.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do we know the lost revenue differential if we if we do it in the garages versus on the street?
That's probably a number he's going to take some time to calculate.
I'm thinking like if you can just do a 1-to-1, so we have what it is for 10 days on the street, what is it for 10 days in the garages by estimate? So then we can extrapolate from there.
Well, let me see if I can draw something up.
Okay.
Mayor, Council Bagley.
Dr. Munch,
Councilor Bagg.
Mayor, I think that's an excellent suggestion that you had, and with previous talks with the parking department, the High Hanover garage is a bit cumbersome to program because the stuff there is antiquated. So why don't we propose from Monday, December 11th through January 1st? If that's acceptable to the parking department.
In the garage.
It's not
In the garages.
it's not necessarily a matter of being acceptable. I want to be respectful. It's just a matter of whether or not we get the response times we're hoping for from the vendor. The vendor for that garage requires that they make changes for us, where we have more flexibility with the vendor at Foundry Garage. So I'm drawing up data from December 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022, just to give a month's worth. Let's see. Hang on one second. So last December, Hanover and Foundry, 244,000. And that's for the month of December. And let me pull up on street. Zone A was 195 and zone B was 53. So it shows less, and the reason it shows less is because people tend to stay quite a bit longer in the garages because they know they've got a flat rate there. It doesn't accelerate after the third hour, so it's a difficult apples to apples consideration because the behavior is markedly different, and that is precisely because of the way we price on street to encourage a 3-hour turn where we do not have that escalator in either garage. So it's, again, it shows oddly that you have more in the garages than you have on street for a month of December last year. But when you consider why we price things the way we do, it actually makes a lot of sense that the garages are making more money because the length of stay at Foundry is almost 8 hours because we have a lot of workforce down there, and the length of stay at Hanover is roughly 4.5 to 5, and on street it's under 3.
And we gave away a week of free parking last December, right?
Yes.
On the street.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is valued
3
at
hours,
about
3 hours free,
And that number's 300,000, correct, Ben?
roughly.
I would be amenable to the garage if we did it from the 11th to the 2nd. I'm just putting my 2 cents out there.
Through the 1st?
Through the 1st.
Agreed.
Second agrees.
Make it as a motion and then.
Should I?
Yeah.
I would offer a amendment to your motion to amend the date of start to be Monday, the 11th through January the 1st, which is a holiday, to be 3 hours free in both city garages. Is that clear, Kelly? I'm all mumbles today.
I would like to ask a question of Ben Fletcher. I had one additional question around parking, the parking program we have for employees downtown. Is there a way to make sure that they're also credited for the 3 hours of free parking? I know that they pay for day passes. Or is there a way to do that? in any way?
I honestly, I don't know the answer to that. That's the first time this has been posed to me. No, that is an actual validation where a specific person is getting a credential, whereas the 3 hours free at each garage would be for everybody. I don't know how the system would accept or not accept because the $3 is for a 10-hour stay. What we could do is if somebody stayed longer than 10 hours, we could grant them, because the garage will automatically start charging the hourly rate after 10 hours. Let's say somebody has a long shift, maybe they stay downtown with their friend, or maybe they go out after work and they don't want to take their vehicle home, so it stays overnight. After the 10-hour stay, the garage begins ticking up $1 an hour after that. We could manually, if somebody were to overstay the 10 hours, back off anything up to $3. That would be a way to do it, and we don't see that many of those.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you accept my?
Yes.
amendment? Did accept that? I didn't hear you.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to change it to December 11th to January 2nd of 3 hours parking in the garage.
And we will do everything we can to make that happen. I will know more tomorrow about the time turn.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So now we have the actual floor amendment, or the floor vote as amended by Councilor Denton. I think it's improved. Still not going to support this. I feel like the idea that it's going to, I think that in the spirit of the holiday season, we should be giving our premium product that we all agree on as premium to those. I am concerned about the perception that this is going to look at as seemingly still less money that we're losing as a city, and a desire to claim revenue instead of have everybody have a break from parking enforcement full on. But that's why we have the votes. But I'll ask for a roll call on this.
Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Tabor,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Moreau,
Yes.
Counselor Bagley,
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi,
No?
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Mayor McCackron.
Nope.
Motion passes 6-2.
6-2.
Yes.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks,
Enjoy the
Ben.
rest of your evening.
We all do the same.
Next up, we have a resignation from Abigail Jindal from the Conservation Commission. I await a motion to accept her resignation with regret.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, appointments to be considered. Stephen Buzzell to the Cemetery Committee, Kelly DeCrossi to the Citizen Advisory Committee, Susan Durling to the Citizen Advisory Committee, Alice Carey to the Conservation Commission, Maria Papas to the Library Board of Trustees, Tyler McLaughlin to the Library Board of Trustees, Rick Chelman to the Planning Board, Paul Giuliano to the Planning Board, Peter Weeks to the Trustees of the Trust Fund, and then there's a few, Emma Stratton, Courtney Perkins, Karen Rosania, Robin Outman, Lehman, Linnea Grimm, John Elias, Eli Kanor, Kenneth Goldman, Jason Goodrich, Genevieve Alshely, Jeffrey Cooper, Catherine Sarela, Teresa McDowell to the Arts and Cultural Commission, and then Linnea Mullaney to the Public Art Review Commission. There was some confusion. The Public Art Review Commission will continue its work as a standing committee next year. It's the subcommittee of the cultural plan that will fall off along with the Blue Ribbon Committee. And then we have some appointments to be voted. Herb Lloyd, Aubrey Gower, Effie Malley, Jessica Blasco, Steve DeTroio, Burt Cohen, Tori Brooks, William Lyons, and Chaz Sullivan to the Sustainability Committee. I'd wait a motion to appoint the aforementioned names to the Sustainability Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're on to Councilor Tabor, Councilor Moreau, and Councilor Blaylock.
Okay. We had our subcommittee with the citizens, for the citizens' request to the CIP. There were in total 95 citizen submissions. There were 47 unique projects out of that. And we say that because sometimes citizens actually submitted in the same project. There were 6 that were truly CIP eligible, 24 that were already existing CIP projects, and then there were 7 submissions that were suited for other processes, whether it be a purview of another commission or board, not city property, not capital, able, that sort of thing. So the first ones that we took a look at were all of the 6 that were CIP eligible, and 3 of those were actually in the schools. 2 were for air conditioning in the schools, and 1 was for air purification in the Portsmouth schools. We had 2 people we had the
Superintendent.
Thank you, the superintendent.
And the business manager.
There we go. At the meeting, who were able to really express to us that this is just, these specific projects at the schools that were requested aren't really a high priority, that they have a long-term plan, and some of this is in a much longer-term plan versus the short-term plan, and therefore it's just not feasibly capital expenditures that the school's willing to put forward. So those are going to not move forward immediately, but I know that they will put them on probably more than the 6 years that we're looking at now plan. The next ones were talked about adding lighting to like Haven Park. We basically left it with the city that they're going to go out and really try to look at whether or not that neighborhood and all of the surrounding neighbors really want the lighting at Haven Park, to determine the true interest, what the cost would be, because it would involve a lot of trenching and whatnot in order to get lights out there. So we want to make sure that the neighborhood understands, if we move forward, what it is entailing and what has to happen. The other ones that are CIP eligible was indeed ones for the Public Art Trust Fund and Historic Record and Artifact Conservation and Storage Assessment. They are moving forward with adding those to the CIP, and you guys will see those moving forward. We also suggested that we look to see whether or not any LCHIP grants might be available for those projects as well. Other things that was discussed and brought forward, the sound barriers. I think we all know that the sound barriers for at least what the New Hampshire DOT are going to start next summer. There was talk, obviously, about the school, and that is, we've looked into it and we haven't quite found a way, so it can't quite go on the CIP until we find a way to actually be able to do sound barriers for the school. Oh, yes, there was a lot of, there was a person who presented to us about the need to replace a lot of the park equipment at Little Harbor School. So we had some conversations about that and maybe some more immediate needs and how they might be able to go about that. And then there was a really good case for a need for a sidewalk at the Hillside neighborhood from Greenleaf Ave up to Lafayette Road. And I have asked the city to get us 2 details: one, whether or not we actually have the rights to that land and how much it might cost, so that possibly on December 21st at our planning board review of the CIP that we might be able to add that before it comes back to this group in January. Anything I'm forgetting?
Oh, that was good.
There you go. There's your update. Anyone have any questions?
Councilor Moreau? That's it for council items. Next up, approval of grants, donations, acceptance of the ARPA funds for the Fleet Street roadway reconstruction in the amount of $519,500. I'd await a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into an ARPA grant amendment number 1 with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services for the modification of the anticipated project's substantial completion to the existing grant agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. And any opposed? Next one is the acceptance of the Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements, the CRISI grant in the amount of $460,000. To wait a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into a grant agreement with the United States Department of Transportation to accept $460,000 from the CRISI grant program. This funding will be used to perform preliminary engineering and development of specifications and cost estimates to replace the Bartlett Street Bridge near the intersection of Bartlett and Kate Street.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? City manager's informational items.
Thank you, Your Honor. Item number 1 is a report back on the situation involving the Jones Avenue scrapyard property. And Deputy City Attorney Trevor McCourt is here if you have any questions relative to his memo. Otherwise, that is provided as information to you all. So, your pleasure.
Any questions for Councilor Moreau?
I just would like to know, I know that the reason why it's being used for construction laid down at this point is because it's a city project. Do we have any way of monitoring or ensuring that they don't use it for other projects beyond the city project? That they might not be allowed to do so?
Thank you, Councilor, Mr. Mayor, City Council. They would be prohibited from using the property for construction laydown for any other project other than a city project, as that would be prohibited by zoning. And I mean, we would enforce that through our ordinary zoning enforcement mechanisms.
I guess really more, I'm like, how could we know if they're happening simultaneously? Like, we really wouldn't have any way of knowing whether or not they had another project and that they were using it for, because they're going on at the same time. But at least when we know our project is done, it should cease, right?
That's right. And, you know, we do work closely with the property owner and their council and those people on staff at the site, not just on the city's project, but on all activities over there. And we do receive reports very regularly from residents in the neighborhood. So I do feel confident that we would know if it was being used for laydown for other projects. The actual laydown activities were rather specific. You know, it was for specific items that we would know and be able to account for. So I do feel confident we would be able to identify if it was being used as laydown for a different project.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you for answering our questions this evening. I have a question around noise ordinance and whether or not we do any monitoring of noise created by this property in the neighborhood.
We do on a complaint basis. Jason Page is our zoning enforcement officer, and when we receive complaints, he has a device capable of monitoring noise, and we will send him out to monitor noise at any property that we receive complaints about the noise.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Just a quick one. The intended purpose of the variance is to operate as scrap metal yard, as I understand. Is this a correct statement?
The lawful pre-existing non-conforming use, that's correct. Yes,
Right.
as a scrapyard.
Uses that are not contingent with that, whether or not they are, and if they're not permitted by the city, like, for instance, like snow removal to be housed there will not be permitted in the future. Is that correct, or have not been permitted up until this point?
They have not been permitted, and we enforce on a complaint basis. So when we receive complaints, we investigate. We try to work with the property owner to discontinue the use, and that could include a variety of enforcement mechanisms.
And is there a time when we get enough complaints about a situation where we will actively, like for Jason and his noise thingy, go check it outside of a complaint window to make sure that outside of a complaint being lodged, there's some monitoring of this, or no?
I'm certain that historically speaking, that has happened.
Okay. And what happens, I guess, if there is if a complaint is filed and there's merit to the complaint, what enforcement mechanisms does the city possess to ensure that something along those lines of the complaint ceases?
Well, I mean, we have a wide variety of options to us. Generally, we try to work with property owners, especially property owners who, perhaps are operating in good faith, just to try to get them to discontinue the activity. That's ultimately our goal. That can include just talking to them, talking through the issue, trying to get them to. But above and beyond that, the city certainly has other enforcement powers. So it could bring people to court, and levy fines against them, seek injunctions, injunctive relief, which holds the power of the courts behind it. So that's basically how that would escalate.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney McCourt. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. The second informational item is relative to the disposition of the McIntyre property. So the city received notification early Friday morning from the GSA that the GSA has closed on the sale of the property with Mr. Anthony DiLorenzo of 80 D Street LLC. And as such, the sale closing terminates the license agreement that existed between the GSA and the city. We have since met with Mr. DiLorenzo to try and open the lines of communication, understand what he has planned. He doesn't have a plan yet, but he was very clear that he looks to monetize the parking that he owns privately. But when we were talking to him initially, he thought the closing would take place on December 4th. So we took advantage of the ability to monetize the lot through December 3rd. I messaged him on Friday to make sure that was still okay. He said that was fine. We were careful to message that as of December 4th, it is no longer city parking. As such, he has filed a permit to allow a separate private vendor to operate as parking. So that is the McIntyre update as I know it. As he has a vision and becomes clear what he'd like to do, I'm sure we will bless you, hear back from him. So if there are no other questions, I can tackle my third information item.
Just a quick question. We will provide significant signage that this is changing over above and beyond what is typically found at one of those lots that confuses people into thinking this is still a...
There's a big electronic sign there now. I saw it when
We
I
will
drove
leave
by
it there for a
recently.
short period, yep.
Big one.
To touch on that, I wonder if we could get some type of report back from legal on what could be. Obviously, we cannot control what is on signs on private property, but maybe because there is a lot of confusion of whether they are city-owned sites. I would say monthly we get a few emails from people who've gotten tickets there. So I would like a report back from legal of what we could put on signage that is public property, either adjacent or close to these lots, if that is possible. Thank you.
Sure, we can do that. We've had some discussion about that, so we'll get a report.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, the Peace Development Authority Board met on November 16th, right after our last council meeting. Some highlights include that the Arrivals Hall project is ramping up soon, which will greatly enhance the customer throughput experience. The Fidelitone lease, the fulfillment center for a large company, that lease was approved for 4 years, and they broke ground in November. Golfing was still going on, and they've achieved a record number of rounds for this calendar year. And the Peace Golf Course was named the Small Business of the Month of October by the Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth. Of note, and I don't know if the paper has done a story on this, but Allegiant Airlines will not likely bring back the Nashville flight. Combination of things. It was given a tough scheduling slot. It was hard to fly out, either crack it on Friday and come back crack it on Sunday. And there's increasingly cheap competition in Boston. However, Allegiant's other three business lines are doing strong. What they call their load factor is strong, which means the planes they run are full. And to put it in perspective, there was no service from Allegiant just 4 years ago. So the fact that they've established 3 strong business lines is good, and that doesn't mean they might not establish more in the future. So that's the commercial airline update. And lastly, there's a new assistant port director working for Gino Marconi. His name is Miles Greenway. Thanks, Your Honor.
Anything under miscellaneous? Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I am sure that everyone here is aware that one of our state representatives, Robin Vogt, resigned last week, and that opens up a seat in Ward 1 that is shared with Newington. I know that we are currently trying to figure out how we're going to handle that, but it was brought to my attention that the City Council may need to take quick action to request a special election in order to have one by March. But because I'm not an attorney and because I don't know the intricacies of the law, I wanted to move to request that the city attorney and city clerk investigate whether or not the City Council needs to take quick action and the timing necessary for that action in order to hold a special election by the end of March.
Counselor, I can tell you that Kelly Barnaby has an update straight from the Secretary of State's office as of about 4:30 this afternoon.
Correct. So in speaking with members of the Secretary of State's office, I was advised that due to the time frame for under the law for when you can have a special election, and how the law reads, they will not fill that seat right now. So it will stay vacant.
Okay.
What did the,
Like for a year?
So I'm going to modify my motion then.
Well, to give color to Kelly's remarks, there isn't time to get ballots to Portsmouth and Newington
Right.
to allow for overseas ballot counting, which needs to happen by December 9th. That physically can't happen
Thank
in
you.
order to accommodate a January 23rd election.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Then I'm going to modify my motion slightly.
Okay.
Because I'm not anticipating a January 23rd election. I was looking at the March 12th date, which is town meeting in Newington, as a
Actually-
possibility.
Let me just say this. When I was looking at the calendar, when I was looking at the state representative districts, I neglected to see that it was just Ward 1. It's not Flotario, so it doesn't involve Newington. So that was miscommunication on my part, so I apologize for that. So it's just Ward 1 in Portsmouth. So in order to get the UO Carver ballots out by December 9th, it wouldn't be possible to hold that special election on January 23rd. So I can certainly ask them if we could look at holding it, a special election on a separate time frame. I will tell them that you inquire that, and I will ask that of them, but it doesn't seem likely on their part from our discussions.
So I guess I have a question around that. Do I need a motion for you to explore that? My understanding was that there is an executive council meeting December the 20th, and this would have to go to the executive council. And in order to do that, the city council would have to take action, but the deadline for their agenda packet is December the 13th, which we do not have another meeting before then. So that's why I'm asking, that's why I was requesting the motion to examine whether or not that's actually the case.
I can tell you in my hour before the meeting, when I was looking, there are deadlines in which the election would have to occur after the GNC, after Governor and Council declare the special election. So it has to take place not less than 110 days, no more than 124 days. I haven't gotten much further than that in terms of how they come to decide. I think that's in the Constitution as opposed to in a statutory framework. So we can certainly join forces and examine those questions and get back to you.
What, can I ask a question? Because that seat also represents parts of Newington. Does it?
Does.
Yeah.
when they redistricted.
It was just,
It is, oh, sorry. It is part of Newington.
not from my information, but I will certainly ask that question as well.
Yeah, I was just saying that if, if the Secretary of State confirms that, we should also make sure that we are, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
We will make sure that all avenues are addressed.
Thank you.
You're
so
welcome.
I have no questions.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
We're happy
And
to
do you need a motion, or are we good without a motion?
Good with that one.
We're good with that one.
Okay, very good.
So just want to make sure we're good without a motion. So if it's for the Governor's Council, would they meet before March 23rd or no?
The council meets December 20th.
No, we meet their council meets December 20th. Do they meet
The Newington Town meeting is March 12th.
March 12th? But would they meet, would the council, like, is the 20th meeting, is that what the only one we could get it on if it was going to be? Okay.
Because they have to have 110 days post that meeting to make, you have to have at least 110 days for scheduling. to
Okay,
schedule
and
an
does the
election.
council have to vote in order to schedule that? Or could we just send a letter to be under the agenda as like the mayor, I can just send a letter as, without a vote, as long
It's
as.
not clear.
Yeah,
It's
that's,
not.
that's my question. That's my real question.
not
Okay,
clear.
so
Does the
could we,
council
I'd wait
need
a
to
motion
take
to, if necessary, authorize the city attorney and the city clerk to request an agenda item on the the December 20th executive council meeting pertaining to this special election for Ward 1 and Newington.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, anything else under miscellaneous? Good night, Portsmouth.
Motion?
Oh,
Motion to adjourn.
I'd wait a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
I was on vacation. You already
Want to leave the
kinda-
Magic Kingdom.